computer. Thank you. And then we will have share screen. Share screen. Why can't I share the screen? Well, we always go through this. You'd think we'd learn by now. We think I'd learn by now. How do I get my screen? Can I get the Yoga Sutra? Sorry, bear with me. Share screen. Okay.
Edwin, you have to make sure that you have the Yoga Sutras open on your computer screen.
Yeah, I have it open on my computer. I had it ready.
Okay, so then you go to share screen.
You cannot minimize Zoom. All right, so don't do that. But it was open. I don't know where it went. Hold on, let me just. There it is. So why? Okay, so there it's open. And then I hit the share screen. Let me just. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong. Oh, all right, everybody. Can you see this? Can you see it?
Yes.
Picture, I can.
Guess who that is?
Rudraksha.
There he is. Giving some love to a bull. And that's some of the bulls are huge. They're bigger than we are. So he made it. See if we have some other photos. There he is again. Can you see that? So this is the bull shelf. It's a huge place. And the Kaushala, well, Rudraksha hasn't seen that yet. But I sent everybody the invitation to come to Vrindavan. You're still all welcome to come. What else? Oh, we'll start in a minute, don't worry. Now, is that a happy face? Both of them. They're both happy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So that's that. Okay, we'll move this one away. And we don't want that. We don't want this. Are you still there? I want this one. Yes, you're all still there. And then we will start mutual. We did that already. Mutual and new. We'll cross out of this one. And we'll just make sure our Yoga Sutras is back there. There it is with my primitive yellow. Okay, now I remember. And here we are. Good morning, everybody. We are back. We are here in Vrindavan. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear the background music. It's kind of Brahma Muhurta now. So everybody's it's all the sadhus. It's all ashrams here. Right next door is the Nimbarki ashram. It's a Krishna lineage. There's various Krishna Vaishnava lineages. And the Nimbarkis, they're just such lovely people. And gentle devotees of Krishna. And, Vrindavan has some gaudy, kind of nouveau riche, bourgeois temples, which is fine, why not? There should be different modalities for different kinds of communities. There's nothing wrong. But the Nimbarkis are real sadhus, they're babas. So their ashrams are very just ashrams there. And they're just, they're just wonderful people. I don't know. They just must be a really, just a warm, loving, devoted community. So they're right next door. Their mantra is, instead of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Their mantra is Radhe Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Radhe Radhe, Radhe Sham, Sham, Radhe Radhe. So that's a real Brijabasi. So Vrindavan is called Braj. Locally, no, people don't say Vrindavan, they say Braj, which is the area where Krishna performed, tradition says Krishna performed his leelas. So that's how Vrindavan became the sacred place that it is. So Braj is actually 64 square kilometers, which is where Krishna roamed, according to, I like to say legend, because if you say history, then the academics come charging after you with the linguistics and archaeology and say, oh, no archaeological evidence. And if you say mythology, well, that's offensive, because we all know what a myth is. A myth is something that has cultural value, but not necessarily historically true. If you say legend, then it just means it's a story that people believe to be true. It's handed down as true. Well, you're not taking a position on whether it's true or not. So that's why when I translated the 10th book of the Bhagavatam, if you look at the Penguin Classics, the Krishna that was kind of anyway, I didn't know what to call it. How do you translate the Srimad Bhagavata Purana? Because Purana means that Pura, that which took place in the past, Pura, which is cognate with the English word for. And so that which took place in the past pertaining to Bhagavan, that's the Bhagavata. And then the ta at the end is just for grammatical reason, but it's really the Sri Bhagavan Purana, just like the Bhagavad Gita is really the Gita of Bhagavan, but because the Sanskrit rules, the ending changes depending on what case it's in. So when I was wondering, how do I translate the word Purana? I thought, well, I thought what I just laid out to you, history is not really going to work, and certainly I'm not going to use the word mythology. So legend, the beautiful legend of God. And I got some flack from traditional folks. They said, why are you saying it's legend? I think because, I said, well, legend is just a word saying a story's handed down. Well, and it's not really taking, like the legend of King Arthur. By talking about the legend of King Arthur, you're not saying it's not true. Whereas if you said the myth of King Arthur, then you would be saying that. And if you said the history of King Arthur, well, you'd expect some kind of academic, archaeological findings or some kind of, kind of more empirical evidence. Whereas legend, anyway, so legend has it that Krishna spent his youth, the real Krishna of devotion. Once he leaves Vrindavan, he's not the Krishna of devotion anymore. He goes around, kills demons. Eventually, the great Mahabharata war, and of course we know Krishna of the Gita, but who worships Krishna of the Gita? There's maybe one old temple in the whole of India where you have Krishna of Kurukshetra. I mean, maybe some new ones, but there's one traditional one. Everybody worships Radha Krishna and the gopis. So there must be hundreds of thousands of, especially in the north. Radha Krishna is not so big in the south. It's more, Vishnu and Shiva, and it tends to be Krishna. Yeah, it's Krishna of the Vishnu Purana, which is the same as the Bhagavata Purana. And of course, that's the Purana of Krishnamacharya's tradition. It's exactly the same. You look at the table of contents. It's just that the Vishnu is simpler and shorter. But if you're, I've always tried to sort of, well, I guess part of my agenda as a devotee is to introduce the yoga community to the Bhagavata Purana, and that really is my sort of ultimate, kind of goal. If you notice my Yoga Sutras, it's full of references to the Bhagavata Purana and stories, and I'm hoping to, I was part of which was to sort of get that samskara out there. So some of you folks would, and if you look at the Bhakti Yoga book, look at the covers, they're identical. I mean, their format's identical. It's meant to sort of create the sense of a set. I'm hoping to do the Gita and stick it in the middle. But the idea is to link, the sort of stoic, the Yoga Sutras is just about your Svarupa. Bhagavat Purana is about Bhagavan, over and above our own Svarupa. So, so Bhagavata Purana. So the Vishnu, so if you're looking for a way of connecting to that through let's say your Iyengar folks, then Krishnamacharya and Guruji Iyengar, in their lineage, right? White and red. Look, my lineage is this is the Gaudiya lineage. This is the footprint of Krishna, by the way. So these, is the footprint of Vishnu, meaning a servant of God. So we put our head at the feet of God, and this is theistic. And so this is it's supposed to be a footprint, but I don't know what kind of a footprint that is. Krishna must have pretty weird feet if it ends up looking like that. But anyway, that's called tilak. It's called tilak. So the Iyengar is the same. It's just white. It's just white with red in the middle, but it's going up. And that's then you know it's Vaishnava. And if it's going this way, I've told you before, that's Advaita. So now it's Brahma Muhurta, Vrindavan is waking up. And when I first came here, it was peacocks everywhere. It was green. The Yamuna River just flowed right where it was supposed to flow. There were green parrots. There were ashrams. And now it's just polluted and just, it's crowded, but polluted. And I have to say, my friends, so corrupt, with as Delhi becomes nouveau riche, as Delhi's up the road, it's 2 hours up the road. So all of the banyas, the wealthy, they're pious, and they'll come down to Vrindavan, they'll buy land and build them, ashrams, and the whole place has become like the same thing has happened actually in Assisi in Italy. So it's changed, but the magic's still there. You just have to go. You basically what the Babas and the people that really come here to practice, to fix their mind on Krishna, to they withdraw. They don't go running around in the bazaar like Rudraksha and I did yesterday, right? Rudraksha went running around getting stuff, but they withdraw into their sacred places. So it's full of sacred place. Everything is an ashram. There's no one would come here unless they were. Well, of course, there's a service industry, but people come here from all over India, just because it's a holy place, and serious people are coming to fix their mind on Krishna, and then pious people come because it's a holy place, and they get merit, and they get punya, and they hope to get blessings. So there's like in any religion, there's different levels of participation, and that's all good, right? We'll let Bhagavan decide what's what and who's who. So here we are again. So if you might hear in the background, so now everybody, they're already awake next door. They're doing their Mangalartis, but you hear the bells. And as I said, when I first came here, the peacocks would start cooing around this time. So whereas you had roosters in the west, they had in Vrindavan. Now I haven't seen. You don't see peacocks anymore. Gone. Green parrots disappeared, I don't know, 20 years ago. There were green parrots everywhere, and there's barely any vegetation, and the monkeys are totally out of just just massively populated, and the only way they can survive is by foraging. It's not their fault. We've devastated the natural landscape, so they forage, and because all of the pilgrims come, and they give some of the ashrams, the wealthy, they have food, feeding places to feed the pilgrims, and people throw away their plates, and so the monkeys live on that. They live in the garbage, but they've become urban monkeys, and they're aggressive. Which yesterday, Rudraksha and I were in the bazaar, and I was holding my bag. The monkey just snatched it, and you can't wear your glasses. The monkeys snatched it right out of my hand, and of course, I was lucky. When he realized that there was no fruit in it, I dumped it. Fortunately, it didn't fall in the gutter, right next to the gutter. Had cloth in it. So they're aggressive. And that's okay, but if they bite you, and they bite kids, I don't know how many kids get bitten by rabies. It's like thousands every year. So then you have to have a tetanus shot. And they can kill little kids, or we had my friend's friend, had 4 sisters, and one of them was killed by a monkey. I mean, years ago, when she was little. So they can, like any community, or I suppose like humans, they're aggressive members. So you have to be careful of the monkeys, but you can't blame them either. And these are the little monkeys. Then there's the big langur monkey. They're much more majestic. They're much more elegant. They're not aggressive, but but they say one of those can take down two men. They're powerful. There's the Hanuman monkeys. You don't get them here. You get them in Rajasthan, and other parts of India. Here they're the little monkey, either smaller monkeys. I don't know what they call them, but in Hindi, bandar, and the other one's a langur. So on we go with Nyaya. And we'll start with our invocation. Om Jnana Timidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminite Namine. Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Vicharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vishchatti Deshatarine Akanda Mandala Akaram Yena Vyaptam Characharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari. You know that. Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari. Now you should be able to understand that. Okay, you maybe not, you wouldn't understand Tapta Kanchana Gaurange. She's golden. Tapta Kanchana, burnt gold. Gauranga, Gauranga, her angas, like Ashta Anga, Gauranga. Her angas are Gaura, golden. Well, you wouldn't understand that, but you should be able to understand Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe, right? Which is the vocative of just like Hari Hare, right? That's vocative. We you know, in English we don't have that case vocative, but we use it like O Radha. So that then in feminine long R, it becomes Radha, becomes Radhe, and Hari becomes Hare, and Krishna becomes Krishnaya, Narayana becomes Narayanaya. That's why it's Om Namo Narayana. Well, no, it's not. No, hang on. What am I talking about? No. Vocative Krishna is Krishna. I'm sorry, I was mixing the dative with the vocative. It's early. Narayana remains Narayana, but Radha becomes Radhe. So Vrindavan Ishvari. Why is it Ishvari? Because, well, Radha's not an Ishvara, she's an Ishvari. She's a lady. So she's Vrindavan Ishvari. She is the Ishvara of Vrindavan, not Krishna. Radha controls Krishna by love, my friends. This is Ma. You know, people think that Durga, well, Durga is Prakriti. She's also Maya. So in the sort of, so she's the power, the Prakritic Maya in the kind of majestic sort of way. No question. But Radha doesn't control by Maya, just by being Prakriti, because we're all controlled by the gunas. So that is Maya. What is Maya? Maya is not something else. Maya is not some other thing, and then there's the gunas. No, there's Prakriti. You look at your Sankhya charts, it has Purusha Prakriti, and then it has the Prakriti, the three gunas, and then it has Buddhi, and then it has Ahankara, and it has all this other things. The Indriyas and the Manas, right? And the Karamindriyas, Gyanindriyas, and then you have the Tattvas. Well, where's Maya then in that chart? It's not there. Why is it not there? Because it's not some other thing. But what is it then? It's the three gunas. Krishna says in the Gita, Devi hi esha guna mai mama maya duratyaya. So all of that is, other than Purusha, all the rest of it is Devi, Durga. And one of her forms is Prakriti in the three gunas. So she controls us all. We're all trapped under the gunas. And so that's power. That's power of a kind of, I wouldn't say aggressive, but it's force. Well, there are different kinds of forces. And Radharani controls by love. Durga, Prakriti cannot control Krishna. Krishna says, Mama Maya, this is my Prakriti. So Durga cannot control Krishna. She does her job. She's a form of Ishvara, has a job to do. Just like Vishnu has a job to do, create. Krishna doesn't create. Why doesn't Krishna create? Because creation is a job. And what does that mean? It means you have to do your job then. So how are you free, supremely free? So then then you have a dharma like everybody else then. If you're a creator and your dharma is to create Chaya, Lakshman, Sarabhyato, school selling. Poor old Lakshman, I woke him up. I couldn't find my key to log on.
Switch off the fan also.
Yeah.
Downstairs.
Oh, I put it on, yeah. So therefore, Krishna just engages in love with his bhaktas in Goloka. And when creation is necessary, they manifest Vishnu. Vishnu goes and creates. Because think about it. If you're trapped in a system of cosmic cyclicality, and you have to create every, whatever it is, 8 billion years, and then you lie dormant for another period of it, whatever it is, 1,000 yuga cycles, and then you wake up again and create. Well, then you've got a dharma like everybody else. So then how are you supremely free? So Krishna doesn't create. He leaves that to Vishnu. And then when it comes down to dissolving the universe, that's Shiva. And so forth. According, in the Vaishnava Puranas, obviously the Shaiva Puranas have a different story. So we're cycling back. So we are controlled by Durga in that sort of a way, but Radha she controls Krishna, but by love. So and the Bhagavatam delights in this, that Krishna is controlled by the love of his bhaktas, the supremely independent one that can never be controlled by anybody, by anything, allows himself to be controlled by love. And Radha then, in that sense, for the Krishna tradition, she's the supreme force, but it's not the force, the power of the gunas and the power of Maya and just the sheer power of the universe, right? But Radha's power is love. So therefore, she's the Vrindavanishwari. She's the real Ishwari. She's the real force in Vrindavan. But that force is the force of love. So the Krishna tradition is all about love. The Narayana tradition is the majesty of God. The Rama tradition is kind of like the Dharma. Rama. Dharma is massively emphasized. All the traditions have their unique and wonderful flavors. Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priya. Apavitra Pavitro Va Sarvavastha Gatopi Va Ya Smarit Pundarikaksham Sa Bhayabhyantara Shuchihi. Okay, my friends, we we'll go to the Nyaya Sutras. We should be doing the Bhagavad Purana. All right, the Self, chapter 4. Okay. So how do we know about the Self? We know about the Self. Let's go to the Yoga Sutras. Let's start here. Okay, here's the Yoga Sutras. You can all see it, yes, friends?
Yes.
Okay, so we all know, right? Atta Yoga Anushasanam, right? So what is yoga? What is this yoga that's been continued, handed down? It's Anushasanam. It's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. We all know that. Now, what happens when you Chitta Vritti Nirodha? Tada. Then what? Drashtu Swarupe Avastanam. There is the situatedness of the seer in its own nature. So what does that mean? That means there's a seer. How do you know there's a seer? Now you see all that work we did with Nyaya. How do we know things? right? How do we get accurate knowledge? We know there's a knower. We know there's the known. We know there is a system of knowledge, a methodology of knowledge, and then we know there's a knowledge episode. There's the resulting, ensuing knowledge. But that resulting, ensuing knowledge requires these other three bits. That requires a knower, and it requires something known, and there's a method. So now the question is, how do we, let's put the Atman, let's plug the Atman in as the object of knowledge. How do we know there's an Atman? And okay, we the knower are, you know, we're seeking this Atman as the known. Now, what method are we going to use to know this Atman? Everybody following? Do you see how so much you're going to be so much more sophisticated now? My friends, we did a little tapas, didn't we? We did a little hard work with the pramanas. Now you're going to get the result. What happens if you do tapas? Well, it's poison in the beginning and nectar at the end, right? The Krishna says sattva, the Gita, sattva is poison in the beginning, that nectar at the end. Not like rajas. Rajas is nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. So we did a little tapas, and you hung in there. Some of you hung in there. But well done. So now we right, you and I are and we got this thing called, we're interested in yoga. We're told by Patanjali, we just read it there, didn't we? We're told that if we do this Chitta Vritti Nirodha, tada, something would happen. There will be a tada. Something's going to happen. What's going to happen? There's going to be an avasthanam, an experience, okay, but literally a situatedness. There's going to be an experience, svarupe, in its own essential nature, right? And verse number 4 says, not the vrittis. But Patanjali says, if you're not in your own essential nature, you're trapped in the vrittis. Vritti sarupya mitaratra. Otherwise, you're stuck in your old mind again, right? Which we's not given us any bliss so far, has it? Our minds haven't given us a few little, gives us some Kodak moments now and again. We have our happy moments, but then they don't last. And then they're replaced, and then pretty soon some unhappy moments. So sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha, sukha dukkha. Okay, so we want to get beyond this sukha dukkha business, and we want to get to something that is adyantavanta kunte. This sukha dukkha business is adyantavanta, beginning and an end, beginning and an end, beginning and an end. And it gets a bit exhausting, and we're getting older, and we're thinking, hang on a minute, isn't anything little bit, some kind of bliss or happiness that's a little bit more consistent? So therefore we hear about these, we hear about this Atman, okay? So we hear from our teachers, from our sacred text. Right, now plug it in. How do we know? We the knower, we hear about this Atman, it's a known. That's the known. And we want to have and so we have a knowledge episode. But how did we get it? Right? How did we get that knowledge episode? Okay, now let's go to another verse in the Yoga Sutra. How do we know there's an Atman? Here we are doing yoga. We haven't experienced it yet, at least I haven't. So why are we sitting there on our mat doing this Chitta Vritti Nirodha? The rest of the world thinks we're a bit odd. Bit weird sitting there, and especially in the 60s when the way people started doing that, thought we were brainwashed. They even had deprogrammers that would kidnap. They would kidnap. Certainly the Hare Krishnas had a truck that, they would kidnap them and take them to anti-deprogramming places. They saw these in the 60s, the counterculture, and some of these, some of the members of the counterculture, they sort of dropped out. Some of them just took a lot of LSD. And they were just sort of hedonistically interested, but others might have done that. But they were really there was some deeper spiritual quest to people who sort of didn't want to sit in, do a 9 to 5 like their parents. And there was this big kind of, the 60s opened up actually the West to Eastern philosophy in a massive way. That's when all the gurus came over. That's why Iyengar came over by Bhaktivedanta, the Krishna, came over with the Krishna tradition, Muktananda with the Shiva tradition. And many others too, Vishnu Devananda, etc. So, okay. So, but it was weird. and parents freaked out all of a sudden. Let's say in the Krishnas that I know them best, and I've written academically about them as well. All of a sudden they see their kids change their names, shave their heads, start wearing orange, look like a bed sheet, and they get up at 5 and they're mumbling, not moving. Imagine in the 60s. He looked like a bloody brainwashed, sitting there for an hour. And the giving up eating meat. Right back then, if you didn't eat meat, you were sick. They send you to the doctor. It wasn't a vegetarian movement. It wasn't sort of in the mainstream. And you change your name, then so that people freaked out. And there was a whole deprogramming thing. And they would kidnap yogis and from different groups, but the Krishnas really got it bad because they were the more radical ones out of all of the. Iyengar didn't require anybody to sort of change their names and their dress or anything, even their philosophy. Iyengar was kind of on the light side of things, and then you had the Shivanandas in the middle somewhere, but the Krishnas on the far right. I don't mean politically, but in terms of tradition. So they got it, and they would take them off to cabins and force them to eat meat, and just try to based on techniques learned in the Korean War, actually, when they believed, and then eventually they realized you can't wash a brain any more than you can't brainwash somebody any more than so then they all became discredited, debunked. So it's so all of that, which is to say, so where, how do we start that, Ritti? So therefore, how do we know? Here we are sitting doing our Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That's how we started. This is a kind of a weird thing to do. It was in the 60s, less so now. But on what grounds do we sit and meditate? Well, we have this idea that pure consciousness. How do we know that there is an Atman? Okay, that's where we're going with this. How do we know? And of course, we connect that then with verse number 117. And there's 3 ways of knowing, which we now at this point, no, we've gone over. It's not 117. That's the Ishvara verse. And we know these here. There are the pramanas. There are 3. There's pratyaksha, right? You can know the Atman. Now remember, all of these 3 have lower forms and higher forms. The lower forms are, knowing mundane things, the tree in my front yard, the fire on the mountain, and the higher things, which are, Atman and Bhagavan, but right now let's focus on the Atman. So there are those that pratyaksha, not literally through the eyes, but, they experience it directly. It's, when the higher pratyaksha is a bit of a misnomer, because it's not really, they call it para and apara, or loka or alokika. So the higher pratyaksha is perception, right? But we haven't perceived it. But the yogis say they have, but we haven't. And then you can infer it. Let's put that on hold. Right now, we're going to talk about the 3 sources of knowledge, the higher, and the object of the higher sources of knowledge is Atman. It could be something else, could be Bhagavan, could be the existence of celestial realms. It could be other kinds of higher forms of knowledge. How do we know the Vedic ritual works? How do you know if you throw ghee in the fire and you chant your mantras that you'll end up in Svarga, in the celestial realm? So there are other kinds of higher knowledges other than mundane ones. But we're going to focus on one form of higher knowledge, and that is the Atman. So you can know the Atman by pratyaksha, and of course that Patanjali is saying, if you do Chitta Vritti Nirodha, you'll have that experience. But until when we start, we haven't had that experience. So when we start doing, a Chitta Vritti Nirodha practice, and someone says to us, "Why are you doing it?" Well, I'm doing it to have a Swarupa Vastanam. I'm doing it to have an experience of my deepest self. Well, how do you know? How do you know that deepest self? How do you have knowledge, right? Okay. How do you know that there is this thing? How do you know it's not just a myth, a fairy tale, some brahmana ripping you off? some cheating, so-called yogi. Well, how do I know? Right. You can't say you know it from experience, because it might take you 20 years or 50 years. I've been doing it 45. I used to think it would take me 5 years. Now I'm thinking 5 lifetimes. Okay, that's one way of knowing. Right. The second way is through words. Well, we know it through words. We've heard about it from the Upanishads, the great sages and the great teachers. So we get knowledge of it. But remember, let's go to the fire. 3 ways the fire. One is you see it, but that's the most powerful way. You see it directly, you know how intense it is, you know how the size of it. The second inferential way, it's much less precise. You might get a sense of it from the quantity of smoke, perhaps, but you don't know how bright it's burning, and you don't know very much more other than there is a fire. And words even less. So everybody agrees that ultimately you got to cycle back. You got to cycle back to ultimately perception. So, but the third way is words, and that's what Vedanta is all about. The Vedanta tradition is all about systematizing the words of the Upanishads and ultimately arguing that the entire Upanishadic project is about Brahman, which is Atman. Okay, now the relationship between Atman and Brahman, remember, that separates the sects. Is Brahman distinct from the Atman? Yes, for Vaishnavism. Brahman is Ishvara, is Narayana, is Krishna. They're synonyms. Brahman equals Ishvara, equals Narayana, Narayana, and for Shaivites, Shiva, and Ma for the Shaktas. But for Advaita Vedanta, no. Brahman is the ultimate, and everything else is Maya, including Ishvara at the end of the day. Everything dissolves, and you're left with eternal, infinite, formless, no forms, no Bhagavans, no Ishvaras, no creation. It's all a superimposition. It's all illusory. It's all a mirage. Okay, and these schools have their different philosophical problems. And the debates have been going on, and you have to, if you want to get serious about this, I suppose you locate yourself, in one school or the other. Now the Nyaya comes along and says, okay, you've heard about it from the Upanishads. You're willing to give it a go, but you're not there yet. So you yourself cannot claim experience of it. You can't claim pratyaksha yet, but you've heard enough about it to convince you to sit on your mat for 50 years, an hour or two every morning, and head in that direction. And your faith is inspired by the examples of great stories of across the centuries and the generations of great yogis. You've read so many, basically the words, you've read the Upanishads, which is the source text. And Nyaya says, okay, well, we're going to give you, to help bolster these words, right? Because you can't claim pratyaksha yet. Maybe one day you will. We hope you will. That's Nyaya would be the first to say, yeah, that's the only way to experience it. I'm not denying that. And they're not trying to say our method is better than yoga. No. They acknowledge only yoga can give you experience. But what they say is, we are going, and we read the verse. What is Nyaya? It is investigation. It is anumana. It is anvikshiki. We're going to give you another method that's going to bolster the words of the Upanishads, and it's called anumana. And in this method, we're going to try to construct methods of investigation using logic to establish that there is a seer, that there is an Atman, and that therefore it makes sense. Therefore, therefore you can have faith, at least that there is an Atman. So therefore, your faith that if you chitta vritti nirodha, and not only that there is an Atman, but it's different from the mind. Although Nyaya's understanding of the mind is very different from Sankhya, so that there is this Atman, it is different from the mind. And yes, we also accept that if you chitta vritti nirodha the mind, your Atman can be liberated, freed from more suffering. They agree with all of that. And only yoga can actually take you to that ultimate place. They agree with that. And they may be yogis in their own practices. But their contribution to the yogic world is that they're going to offer, the Vedantins are offering the words of the Upanishads, clarifying them, repeating them, giving metaphors. I'm bringing philosophy into it as well. It's not that Vedanta is not philosophical. They also use reason and argument. The whole of the second chapter of Vedanta is reason and argument. Let's not get sidetracked. But Nyaya is only about Anumana. Okay? And so that's why we're doing this. Did that make a little bit of sense, my friends? Does it give you a rounded picture of things? Does it? Yeah? Okay. So let's so what are the inferential marks of the self? Remember, how do you make an inference? There has to be a linga, an inferential mark. So the fire? You don't see the fire. Well, then how do you know there's a fire? Well, maybe someone tells you, okay, that's Vedanta. We're not interested in that. Any other way of knowing the fire? Yes, an inferential mark of the fire. What's that then? Smoke. This is why we did those mundane examples, so that we get the method in place. Once you got the method in place, now we plug in the stuff that we're interested in, Atman, Bhagavan. But you got to get the structure first. We did a little hard work on that. But maybe some of you were thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I not reading, life of, Ramana Maharshi? Well, here's why. Once we did that work, now we can use that method for things that have a deeper level significance than whether it's just a lousy fire on the mountain. Well, maybe that's not lousy, given our environmental moment in time. Right. What's the smoke? Linga. You've heard of the Shiva Linga. What is it? It's the sign of Shiva. That in the Shiva is it's a genital of Shiva. You can imagine how horrified the early missionaries and colonial folks were. Imagine they go into a Hindu temple at the end of the 1800s on 90. Oh, what's that? Oh, it's a linga. What's a linga? Oh, it's the genital of God. Can you imagine how horrified and how primitive that would have sounded to an early missionary? So, but the idea is, for the Shaivas, Shiva is the generative principle of all reality. So what's the sign of it then? What's the when someone's born in the hospital and you want to know if it's a boy or a girl, you look for the linga. What's the linga? Well, you look at the genitalia. How else are you going to know? So therefore, the genitalia is the linga of gender. And so you have Strilinga and Pullinga. And the Pullinga is the linga of the man, Pul. And the Strilinga is the linga of the woman, Stri. And in Sanskrit grammar, you have masculine and feminine and neuter nouns, as you do in German. Right? French, Italian have masculine, feminine. English lost it all. English, the Anglo-Saxons were they were too drunk to worry about gender. Like, I forget about gender. But the Germans still have it, and Sanskrit had pulling. So there's Purusha, there's Pullinga, Strilinga nouns. So if you have a long vowel at the end, that's why it's Radha, whereas Krishna. So long R is Strilinga. Long I, like Gopi, so therefore nouns are Strilinga and Pullinga, and then there's the neuter, which is Napunsaka. It's not one or the other. Napunsaka. So they are neuter now. So therefore, so the linga. So okay, now we know what a linga is. It's a sign of something. So therefore, so these words are used in different ways in different contexts. So the Shiva linga, well, that's the linga means something in that text, and then there's the lingering grammar, which is the sign of the gender of a noun, and then linga can be used in all sorts of ways. So now we're going to use it in Anumana, in inference, that the linga of the fire, the sign, is the smoke. Everybody on board? Everybody, Martina, you on board? Now, what's the linga of the Atman? What's the linga of the Atman? We want to make an inference. It's got to be a linga. Clear, one last time. If you see it, you don't need a linga. You saw it. You don't need a sign of, you don't need some other sign of it, some indirect sign of it that's different from it, but indicative of it. You don't need that. You see it. Doesn't matter if it's smoke or not. And you don't need to hear about it. I'm seeing it. Well, I need a park warden to tell me there's a fire. I'm sitting next to the fire, warming my feet. I don't need a park warden to tell me that. So you don't need words if you're perceiving it. But if neither of those apply, neither of those forms of knowledge apply, then you need a linga of it. All right, that's it. Now I'm connecting this with all the work we did. What's the linga of the Atman? The inferential marks, the linga for the self, Atman, are desire, aversion, effort, pleasure, pain, and knowledge. Now you see immediately the distinction between this and Sankhya. Sankhya would say 5 of these 6 are not in the Atman, they're in the chitta. So the raga dvesha, these are your kleshas. These are 2 of your kleshas, 5 kleshas, avidya, asmita, raga dvesha, abhiniveshaha. They're not in the Atman, in Sankhya, they're in the mind, they're in the chitta. Right? So you do Kriya Yoga. Why do you do it? Kleshatanukarana, Samadhi Bhavana Artaha. You want to weaken the kleshas, and the kleshas are in the chitta. So in yoga and Sankhya, the only thing that consciousness is chit. It only has the property of chit. It's sat. Sat just means that it continues to be. Sat is just something that is not subject, that is eternal. But its properties are chit and ananda. Okay, well, Sankhya doesn't even talk about ananda. So these 5, raga, dvesha, and sukha, dukkha, which Sankhya, or even the Gita, places in the mind, Nyaya is going to, and this is not this chapter, elsewhere it will argue, no, these are qualities of the Atman, but they can lie dormant. So what is liberation? Liberation is when these potential qualities are all lie dormant. They get triggered by a mind. And then Nyaya finds itself in a very awkward position. The Nyaya logicians are brilliant. Don't mess with them unless you know what you're doing. But the unfortunate, from their point of view of Vedanta and Sankhya, consequence of Nyaya is that consciousness, 6 things are the properties of Atman. Raga, dvesha, sukha, dukkha, free will, prayatna. Vedanta would accept that, and consciousness. These qualities are only triggered when the Atman is connection with the mind. So they accept chitta vritti nirodha, still the mind. When the mind is still, these qualities are potential but inactive. That's liberation. But consciousness is also in the state of liberation. For Nyaya, they argue themselves into this situation where even consciousness becomes unmanifest in liberation. So liberation is not even a state of consciousness. It's free of sukha, it's free of dukkha, fine. Free of happiness and distress and the up and down, up and down, up and down. It's free of raga and dvesha, desire and aversion, which are the triggers for sukha dukkha. All right, so, and it's free of prayatana, effort, the 6 qualities. We'll go back to them in a minute. But even consciousness is dormant in liberation. And that's an unfortunate consequence. That's what happens when you rely, your philosophy can get you out of some problems, but ultimately you end up with other problems. But that's not our topic today. Our topic today is not about the metaphysics, but we're interested in the inferential marks. So a desire, aversion, effort, play. And when it says knowledge here, it means consciousness. I don't want to get into the way the different words are used in the different traditions. Right. Commentator Vatsyayana. from sensory contact with a certain type of object, okay? You, the knower, through your, this is pratyaksha, right? You contact, your senses contact any kind of object, and pleasure arises. So let's say it's an ice cream, pleasure arises and is experienced by a self. So you experience it, the self experiences, let's just go with, I don't know, ice cream. I don't like ice cream anymore, too much white sugar, but that doesn't matter. Now, the next day, observing another object of the same type, the person desires to have it. Why do you desire to have an ice cream? Because you have a memory of it. Where did the memory come from? A previous experience the day before. Let's just keep it simple. Maybe you had 1,000, 10,000 previous. Let's just go with one day before. You had your first ice cream. Very nice. It produces a happiness in the mind. So the next day, that happiness is a memory. Now, the next day, you now have a desire to recreate that happiness. So your raga dvesha are inseparable from your sukha dukkha. Everybody write this down if you're not familiar with the language. Sukha means happiness. Write it down. If I know most of you are, but I can't assume you all are. Sukha and dukkha. Sukha, happiness. Su in front of any noun is always good. So nice smell, nice feeling. It's going to be su. It's a prefix. And du is always bad. It's always bad. So the Mahabharata war, the 5 Pandavas are fighting their 100 cousins, and they all, the 100, they all got Dusasana, Duryodhana. I don't know what mother would call her kid, 100 kids with the do, but anyway, it's an epic. Let's not get nitpicky here, but they're all Dushasana. All right, so sukha, dukkha. Now, and then raga dvesha, if you're not familiar with your kleshas, write down, because this is language you need. It's all over the Gita, all over yoga, all over Sankhya. Raga is desire, connected to rajas, and dvesha is aversion. So those 4 words, right? And everybody, so when we're looking for sukha, remember, we're looking for sukha, and until we get other kinds of information, we think sukha is going to be found from the contact of a sense with a sense object. This is mundane way of going about living in the world. So you have a sukha episode. So you eat your first ice cream, the contact of a sense with a sense object, it creates a pleasant feeling, gets recorded as a memory. So now that sukha moment is now a samskara. And the next day you get up and you think, oh, what shall I do today? Well, what makes me happy in the past? Oh, I know. Yesterday I had a really good ice cream. You have the memory of sukha. So a raga arises in the mind. A desire. Raga is nothing other than a desire to recreate a sukha experience. That's all it is. A raga is not just some random thing. It's a raga for something. Well, why you have a raga for that thing? Because you believe it's going to make you happy. Why'd you believe that? Because it made you happy in the past. So you infer, actually you're making an inference that, every time I had an ice cream, every time I saw smoke, there's always fire. Well, every time I had a Ben and Jerry, I had a Ben and Jerry, walnut chocolate ice cream, it was always sukha. So I infer today that, why should today be any difference? So now I have a raga for walnut chocolate ice cream. So that's an inference, actually. All right, so you see the and the opposite is true. Well, I tried that. I tried the black cherry. That was bitter and nasty. Now you have a dvesha in you had an experience, and it didn't give you sukha, it gave you dukkha. So now you go to the ice cream shop with your friend, and he says, oh, he or she said, oh, what are we going to have today? And you say, oh, I'm not going to have the black cherry. Well, why not? Well, because it was awful. So now you have a dvesha for the black cherry ice cream, but you have a raga for whatever I just said, walnut, chocolate, whatever I just said. So therefore, the raga dvesha is inseparable from sukha dukkha. Do you see how that works? Now, for Nyaya, these are all states of mind, and they're the inferential markers of the Atman. Why? He's going to argue, but I'll just throw it out here. There's going to be several different arguments, and one is going to be, well, because, you know, atoms of matter, right? I mean, the wall doesn't have raga dvesha for stuff, and it's not conscious. And what's the wall? Oh, it's a bunch of you know, forces and particles. Okay, well, let's pull out a particle. Okay, what's that? An atom. All right, does an atom have raga dvesha? For Ben and Jerry, no. Okay, well, what's an atom? Oh, it's, you know, a string, or it's subatomic, right? So therefore, you have, and this is Tarka from the previous chapter. You clear away alternative, you clear the groundwork, right? The opponent says, well, how do you know matter? You know, why do you say that why you say these are an inferential marker of an Atman? Why can't they just be an inferential marker of some material thing? So you have to eliminate those possibilities by saying, okay, you want to say that a desire and aversion, happiness and distress, consciousness and free will are material. Well, where are they located? Qualities have to be located in a substance. The quality green isn't just floating about in space, because then it would be, the whole universe would be green. So therefore it has to be narrowed down into a substance, the green plant behind me, and that consists of atoms. So qualities are not just universals. Well, they kind of are, but that's another on another level. So you have to sort of locate them in a substance. So what substance are you going to, which substance underpins these markers, these qualities? Now, other qualities like motion, like hardness, like softness, like liquidity, like luminosity, like sound, you can locate them in atoms. You can locate them in material substances. So there's all kinds of qualities that are material, but there are these 6 qualities, says Nyaya, that cannot be correlated with any known material substance. Therefore, they must be inferential markers of something else. That's non-material, my friends. You see where it's all where it's all going to head. And therefore, you call it whatever you want. We call it an Atman. You don't like Atman, we'll call it Amagama. Call it abracadabra then. But we insist that it is a substance different from all other substances. And that's Nyaya. And they're going to do this, they're going to bang away, and they're going to give a whole bunch of reasons. And then at the end of it, they're going to say, okay, now we feel that our arguments in support of an Atman, rather than materialism, and also they'll take on Buddhism, because Buddhism is going to say, Buddhists are not material. They accept consciousness as distinct from matter, but they're going to say consciousness is momentary. And we're going to encounter arguments against that. So, you know, if we run out of time, because I don't want to trap this into a 2-hour period. I want to do this once, and I'm not going to do it ever again. Well, I might. Probably not, though. Very unlikely. And I want it to be done properly. And if we don't finish today, we're going to continue tomorrow, and we'll extend our svadhyaya. Take it or leave it. So it's going to be done properly. So, so then, having done all its work, showing how consciousness, you know, it has inferential markers. Smoke, it can only come from fire. Smoke does not come from water. Smoke does not come from, you know, earth. Wherever there is smoke, it has a particular entity called fire as its cause. So, and that's the inferential marker. So these 6 qualities do not come from matter, do not come from the sky, do not come from string theory, do not come from, you know, subatomic particles whirling around each other. You eliminate all those, and you give reasons why you're eliminating those, and we're gonna run into those, and therefore it has to come from something else, and then you call it what you want. So the Upanishads call it the Atman, and Sankhya says, yeah, Atman, or maybe Purusha, and what's Patanjali called it? Drashtra, the seer. You call it what you want. Right, Patanjali says, well, he says, you know, call it the seer, the drashtra. So, verse 3. Patanjali also uses the term Purusha 3 times, Atman 3 times, but he uses this drashtra and forms similar to it 6 times. So he kind of likes it. and it's in the genitive, drashtuhu, but the drasht. So that's the seer. Okay. The nyaya. All right, now. So the inferential markers. So it's a sensory contact with a certain type of object. Ben and Jerry's. Pleasure arises and experienced by itself. Now the next day, observing another object at the same time. You want to have an ice cream. It's hot summer, so you have one the next day. And which one are you going to have? Well, encountering another object of the same type, you see the same ice cream you had the day before. The person desires to have it. Why do you desire to have it? Because it was good the day before. The desire in bold. Why? It's one of the 6 qualities of the self. Remember Sankhya? Sankhya is going to agree. You know, the differences are not hugely important to yoga, but there are differences in just where the qualities are located. We unfortunately don't have time to get into that. So when the words are in bold in the text, why are they in bold? Because they're in the verse. So what does a commentator do? Take each word and explain it. He's now explaining what desire is. It's the contact of a sense with a sense object in the past, and encounter it again in the future. There's a desire. And what is the desire? So he says, this is the kind of thing I experienced before. I had this Ben and Jerry before. On the part of a single observer, seeing multiple objects of the same type and recognizing them as such. This is going to be important, because Nyaya is going to say the same person who saw it yesterday, in order for desire to occur, it has to be the same person who sees it the next day. Who is this? Who is it? Why is he framing it that way? Because the Buddhists are going to say consciousness is momentary. And one of the big arguments of Nyaya and Vedanta against Buddhism is, if consciousness is momentary, there will be no recognition. For recognition to occur, the person who ate my ice cream yesterday, I must be the same person the next day who sees the Ben and Jerry and remembers. Memory requires a continuum of self. This is one of the main arguments Nyaya raises against Buddhist momentariness. You're going to see a lot of it, because the main opponents of the Nyayikas are the Buddhists. The Buddhists are denying, they're challenging Vedic truisms. What are the Vedic Upanishadic truism? The number one, that Brahman is Sat. And Sat means it's eternal, not momentary. The fundamental nature of Brahman is Sat. And Buddhists are going to say nothing is Sat, everything is momentary. That doesn't make them materialists. That makes them what they're called Kshanikavadins, those that believe that things only last for an instant. Get this: if you're flirting with Buddhism, or you're like, going in and out of Buddhism, Hinduism, and what's this, philosophical Buddhism barely registered in the West. There's mindfulness and really good stuff, but the philosophical underpinnings of Buddhism, it's there, but one wonders how many Buddhists understand the actual philosophical so it's good for you to understand the metaphysics. You make a decision which way you want to go, but they are the main opponents of the Vedic schools, and the Nyayikas are the ones who take them on. Well, Vedanta does as well. Vedanta takes them on in the second chapter. They when I say take them on, it's not like I'm using martial, maybe my language is a bit too martial here, but they're serious debates. They're serious debates, and they are robust. And of course, you should also hear the story from the other side of the fence. If you want to do this properly, then you should read the great. I mean, and some of the most powerful intellectuals in India are the Madhyamaka philosophers and the logicians. So I'm only giving one side of the story because we're reading the Nyaya Sutra. All right, so the opponent then claims consciousness is momentary, and Nyaya says, well, then you can't explain memory. Right. So look, here it is. So this is the kind of thing I experienced before on the part of a single observer. Now, you wouldn't know that unless someone tells you. This is why, study, you slowly broaden your understanding, because whenever they say something, they've got an opponent in mind. They don't just randomly, the commentaries are a huge intellectual conversation with everybody else that's talking in ancient India and presenting different viewpoints. Commentators are not just randomly saying, oh, what shall I write now? Oh, I know, I'll just throw this sentence in here. No, they have a very particular reason to write what they do. So if he says a single observer, you understand the subtext of that is the Buddhist who's saying, no, there's not a single observer. There's a series of momentary observers. And once you begin to enter into this world, you know exactly what the underlying, the commentator, who's he thinking of when he frames it that way? So a single observer seeing multiple objects at the same time, right? Ben and Jerry yesterday, Ben and Jerry the day before, right? What do we say? Walnut and chocolate, Thursday, walnut and chocolate, Friday, walnut, the multiple objects, right? Because each one is different on the next day, of the same type though, because you're going to desire something. The thing you desire has to be the same type as the thing you experience. It can't be something else. And why would you desire it? And recognizing them, you have to recognize, oh, this chocolate walnut is the same as I had yesterday. Recognizing them as such, this is an inferential mark of the self. The first one is desire. First on the list of 6. Okay, let's look at the 6 again. Desire, because I might test you next week. Desire, aversion, when you get embarrassed, and I'll call you out, all right? And I'll say, Shiva, well, what are the 6 inferential markers of the self? And she'll go, I just happened to be spacing out for a minute. Desire, aversion, right? And pleasure, pain. And there's 2 others, effort, that's free will, prayatna. And when they say knowledge, this is chit, except that Nyaya, instead of using the word chit, they use the word jnana, and that's probably, and Sankhya uses the word jnana in a different way. So we don't have enough time to get into that level of differentiation. Let's just call it consciousness. So consciousness itself, remember, Sankhya only recognizes consciousness as a inferential marker of the self. But Sankhya wouldn't have a problem with this method. They wouldn't have the problem with the method. They would say, yeah, we like Nyaya. I mean, they do the work for us. We find it a bit tedious sitting there studying all these rules, but we're glad they're doing it. We just have a slight disagreement. We think consciousness is an inferential marker of the self, but the other 5, well, and they have their arguments as to why these are not properties of the Atman, but properties of the Chitta. But that doesn't matter. They're on board together when it comes to consciousness, which is the main thing, being an inferential marker, the linga of something that's not material. That's the point. Something that's not material, that cannot be correlated with any known material substance. And of course, we know science hasn't found the source of consciousness. We know that. What they call the neurological correlates. Oh, it's some neuron. But my friends, what is a neuron? Other than a bunch of atoms. And what is an atom? Other than subatomic protons and electrons. And what are they? Well, maybe they're strings. So think of what you're trying to say. If you say consciousness is neurological, what are you saying? You're saying that you're going to find consciousness in what? An atom? Or a combination of atoms? Well, if it's only one atom, then what you're saying is that consciousness is correlated with one atom. So it's correlated with a substance. That means that atom is different from all other atoms. Well, then you're saying what yoga is saying. That consciousness is correlated with one thing that's different from everything else. Well, yoga says, okay, you call it a special atom. Well, we're going to call it an Atman. And now if you say it's a combination of atoms, a neuron, well, how many atoms? There's probably trillions of atoms in a neuron. What happens if you take one away? Are you not conscious anymore? See how ridiculous that idea is. So good luck with that. Finding the neurological correlate. It's just faith, my friends. Be clear-headed. There's a difference between science and scientism. Science is a bona fide method, just like Nyaya has its method, and science has a bona fide dharma, hypothesis, observation, whatever, observation, experimentation, whatever it is, right? It's been a long time since school. You have a hypothesis, experimentation, observation, verification, or whatever it is. You have the 4-step process of science, and that is the dharma of science. Science can't start talking about celestial beings and witches casting spells. So that's a different, so therefore science has to dharmically bound to look for consciousness. There's the difference between methodology and metaphysics. Science, the dharma of science is not to start talking about samadhi. No. Its dharma is to look for a material causality for everything. So it has a right to look for material causality for consciousness, but it won't find it. And therefore, and when it realizes that, honest science would say, it's not our domain. We can't speak to this. Go to the yogis. And science says, the minute it says, we believe that it's material causation, they've stepped out of the methodology of science and entered into the realm of metaphysics. To believe, that's science, and to insist is scientism. Scientism is kind of a fanaticism where everything is material. That's a philosophy. That's materialism. Materialism is it's a philosophy. So if a scientist say everything is material, that scientist is not speaking as a scientist, speaking as taking a philosophical position. Now, if a scientist say, well, I'm a scientist and my dharma methodologically is to look for material causation, we do namaha. We do namaha. We accept that. You're doing your dharma namaha. And eventually, after 50 years, if you realize, well, you know what, we cannot find anything any substance correlating consciousness, so that's just, you go talk to the religious folks, go talk to the Platonists, go talk to the philosophers, then they're honest. Okay, keep this in mind. So, and the same thing is what caused Big Bang. Scientists has no business saying, when he's wearing the hat of the scientist, has no business, it can only say it is beyond our dharmic sphere of responsibility. It's beyond it's out of our dharma. What caused Big Bang? Because causality begins at Big Bang. Space and time begins at Big Bang, and we only deal with the post-Big Bang infinitesimal moment. Then our dharma kicks in. What happened with the forces, and then first nanosecond, then our dharma begins. Before that, talk to the metaphysicians, talk to the philosophers, talk to the religious people. We have no business. The minute they talk about it, then that's fine. They can talk about it as long as they acknowledge, well, now I'm talking as a metaphysician. My belief is before Big Bang, blah, blah, blah. Okay, enough of that. I have a little bit of I'm going to teach a course next semester. When I get back on science and religion, I love it. We're going to, because I feel like it, because Nyaya is talking to Buddhism. Why? Because the Buddhists were there, because the Buddhists were there, were challenging them intellectually. Well, who's challenging us? The yogis now. No, it's the scientists that are having alternative explanations of consciousness. So the dharma of the yogi intellectual in our day and age is to engage science. That's the dharma. Oh, if you're an intellectual, you don't have to be an intellectual, but if you are, and if you consider that your dharma, and if you're a bhakta, you might even consider it your seva to Bhagavan. Well, if that's the case, who are you talking to then? You're not going to be talking to the Vedic ritualists, because they 2,000 years ago they kind of went into prehistory. So who are you going to talk to then? You're going to talk to the neuroscientists. You're going to talk to to those who are challenging. Remember Siddhanta. Who remembers Siddhanta? The Siddhanta of a school is the non-negotiable foundational truth of a school. Do you see how this is coming together, my friends? The foundation, we did it on the knowledge sources chapter. So once you use knowledge sources, you end up with a Siddhanta, foundational truth, right? Advaita Vedanta. Only Brahman is real, everything else is unreal. Vaishnavism, no, world is real, soul's an eternal individual, and there is a God. Foundational truth. You might fiddle around with bits and pieces, but that's the foundational truth. Now, what is the foundational truth of yoga? That there's a seer. Right in the beginning. Atha yoga anushasanam. You do this now. This is yoga. Well, what is it? Chitta vritti nirodha. Okay. And then what happens? The seer abides in its own nature. That means there's a seer that has its own nature, not some material nature, not some atomic nature, not some sort of neurological nature. It has its own nature. That's a foundational truth. So if you're a yogi and you subscribe to a foundational truth, then you have to engage those who challenge your foundational truth. Who was challenging it when these commentaries that we're reading now? They were the Buddhists, the momentary, of course, they're still Buddhists. So that conversation is still ongoing. In fact, Buddhism in some ways is academically kind of more, for weird reasons that we don't want to get into, it's somehow more intellectual, has this veneer of being more intellectually respectable, because there are, well, I shouldn't say veneer, there are brilliant, Nagarjuna, Madhyamika is really, is quite, is intellectually very, very impressive. So, but it has, when I say a veneer, I mean, somehow or other, it has, you know why? Because Nyaya isn't so well known in academia. And it's starting to make inroads now. So this old conversation is going to, I think we'll see it now replaying itself between Nyaya and Buddhism amongst intellectuals. But so far, it's mostly been Buddhism that has made a presence in Western philosophy departments. So therefore, that's what I mean when Buddhism has a kind of respectable place in Western philosophical circles, and Nyaya now is going to, just because it's you know, it's hard work actually, but it's happy. Okay, my friends, I hope some of that is interesting, and it doesn't reflect the fact that I had 2 chais this morning. Oh yeah, because I had to wake up. All right, this is the kind of, all right, now that's the inferential mark of the self. Here it is. For such a desire would not be possible if there existed only a series of distinct cognitions. That's Buddhism 100%. Clear as day. They don't necessarily say Buddhism. They will call their opposing point of view by the name. So the momentariness in Sanskrit is kshana. A kshana is one moment. And kshanika vada, remember what vada is? Vada is a person that believes. The Vada is a philosophy. So Advait Vada, Sankhya Vada, Yoga Vada. Vada is a philosophical position, and the Vadin is the person who holds it. So who is the Buddhists? The Kshanika Vadins, those who believe that all reality is Kshanika, only lasts for a moment. So now we know very specifically who Vatsyayana is, why he says this. He's talking about the momentary people, the people that believe in momentariness. So now what's he saying then? A desire would not be possible if there existed only a series of distinct cognition, each with its own fixed content. So you'd have cognition of Ben and Jerry ice cream, it would disappear. Then the next moment, disappear. But how would you, there's no memory. Memory has to be the same thing, surviving. I just want to give you a preview. If something is momentary, there's no overlap with the next moment. If there's an overlap, it means that thing has lasted for 2 moments. Think about someone running with a baton in a relay race, and he's handing over the baton to the next runner. That baton has to go from one runner, 1 moment, to the next runner, the next moment. That's 2 moments. If it disappeared in that moment, it could be no transfer. There would be no continuum. I know I'm taking time out, my friends, but Nyaya needs all of this background. We're just jumping in. When if you can argue that everything has to last at least 2 moments, you've defeated momentariness. It's just like Advaita Vedanta. Advaita says Advaita, no duality at all. If you can establish, well, there must be at least 2 things, finished. What are the 2 things? Advaita Vedanta says everything is Maya. Well, what's Maya then? Oh, what's Maya? You say everything is Brahman, but because of Maya, that this world appears to be real. What's Maya? Is it separate from Brahman? Duality. Is it a part of Brahman? Duality. Does it cover the whole of Brahman? Well, that goes against the nature of Brahman. That's like saying the sun is dark. So this for centuries, this is the main argument by the opponents of the Advaita Vedanta against Advaita. All they have to do is establish, okay, maybe the world is illusory, maybe the soul is, or maybe all of that, but you have to accept there's some kind. This illusion has some kind of. There must be some kind of this thing called Maya. Well, therefore, now you have two entities, and Advaita Vedanta then, has struggled with that, has over the centuries in different ways. Of course, later Vedanta would say it's anirvachaniya. It cannot be expressed by words. But at that point, if you say that, if you then say, oh well, it can't be expressed by words, well then your philosophy, you're no longer in the realm of philosophy. Then your opponent will say, well, then you don't have, your philosophy has failed you then, because philosophy is precisely to use words in a coherent and logical and so therefore that's the Achilles heel of Advaita from the point of view of its opponents. Obviously Vaishnavism has its Achilles heel. If there's a God, and then the whole story of evil, which have sort of plagued Christian theologians, and so that could be all right. But the Achilles heel of Buddhism is, for one moment to appear the same as the next, there must be a transfer of Shakti, some cause effect relationship has to be there. One moment has to cause the next. There has to be overlaps. There must be at least two moments, maybe even three. That's all you have to establish. And then then from your point of view, the theory of momentariness it collapses. So that's sort of where Vatsyayana eventually will go. And then the same thing with aversion, caused by pain. Aversion is the second sign of the Ātman. The second one is aversion. Also arises from such recognition that you recognize the awful, horrible black cherry ice cream, right? Exactly the same thing. He doesn't talk about it very much because it's the same principle. By putting together various experiences on the part of a single perceiver of many objects. So what's the point on the single? There has to be the same person who ate it yesterday, recognizes it today, and either likes it or doesn't like it, is averse, has a raga or a dvesha, doesn't matter which one, but it has to be the same person. He's going to develop this argument throughout. A person makes effort, the third thing, effort. The third, right, free will, effort, prayatna, is the third sign of the self. Atoms don't make effort. They're governed by forces like gravity and electromagnetic. They don't have the free will. They can't just break their orbits. Okay, fine. Now we have the quantum thing, but it's just not understood. I don't think, it's far too premature to say that they break cause and effect. All right. A person makes effort to have something, perceiving that, and why do you make an effort to have something? Same principle. It's the same type of thing as that which she knows causes pleasure. Why we make an effort, we go out in the world and we endeavor to do something. Well, why do we endeavor to do that thing and not some other thing? Because that's the thing that we believe is going to give us pleasure, or at least help us avoid unhappiness. So you can say, well, I got to get up at 9 o'clock and I make an effort and it doesn't really give me pleasure. No, but if you didn't, you wouldn't get paid. And that creates an aversion. So your aversion is, then you're doing it to avoid the aversion. So this is the effort which would not occur. This is the point. You couldn't have effort without a self as a single perceiver. Notice this stress on single perceiver, single perceiver, single. It's got to be the same person of many objects of the same time over time, right? That is, without that which puts together the various experiences. The same person has to know, well, I won't get paid. How do I know I won't get paid? Memory. And so the whole point is there is an Atman, an eternal Sat Atman. There is a continual Sat. It can't be multiple different ones changing every second, because the second moment would not. Why would the second moment recognize the experience of the first? He's going to go on to develop that argument. Let's see what he says. For again, such would not be possible if there existed only a series, he's repeating himself, Buddhists, only a series of distinct cognitions, each with its own fixed content. So you have a moment of cognition, and the next moment is completely distinct. Well, how would you account for memory? The second moment doesn't know anything about the previous moment, if it's distinct. The third moment doesn't know anything about the second or the first moment, if it's distinct, and on down the line, fourth moment, fifth moment, sixth moment. How would you account for memory? None of those moments knows anything about the previous moments. So when Vatsyayana is saying, I go into the ice cream shop, I have cognition of the Ben and Jerry, but that's a momentary cognition. I taste it, it's good, momentary. Next moment wouldn't remember the first moment. What to speak of the moment the next day? That would be a trillion moments later. That moment of consciousness the next day. How would that moment remember the goodness or badness, the sukha or dukkha of the ice cream, if it's a completely different moment? This is the argument. Probably the most consistently repeated argument against momentariness. Furthermore, a person remembering pleasure along with pain secures the relevant means to gain pleasure and avoid pain by effort. She experiences pleasure and she experiences pain. Remembering such experiences, he's just repeating himself, but we should repeat ourselves, because only through repetition, my friends, honestly, repetition, not only, don't think we know anything, we just go deeper and deeper. When I teach the Yoga Sutras, and I wrote that, I can't remember, 10, 15 years ago. And sometimes, and people invite me to do the Yoga Sutras. Once you have a book out there, everybody wants you to, come and lecture on it. And there are times when I think, oh God, here we go again. Why can't we do, bhakti? But the minute you read, you're engaging it again. Each time you get deeper insights, no different from your downward dog. Every time you do a downward dog, something opens up. Maybe you put pressure on your thumb this time. You never did that before. In 20 years of downward dog, you never pushed down on your thumb. Maybe you never pulled your kneecaps up. Maybe, you'd hope after 20 years you do that. Maybe you didn't realize it, and then all of a sudden a really good teacher says, look, you're clenching your shoulder blades. Each time you're going deeper. This is svadhyaya. It's not like anything else. So never think, oh, I've done that, I only have to do that again. Of all people, I could say that a number of times. First of all, writing that book took 5 years, and then lecturing on it, it just incessantly, because it's out there now. And but the minute I surrender my mind, I think, okay, it's always it's almost like a completely new experience. So therefore, Vatsyayana is being repetitive. All right. Right. So she, so encounters a person remember pleasure along with pain, right? Secures the relevant means to gain pleasure and pain and avoid pain, experiences pleasure and experiences pain. Remembering such experiences the next day, she puts herself in a position to understand matters of pleasure and pain. The reason for this is just as was stated above. He's acknowledging he's being repetitive. A person wanting to know something reflects, right? So we want to know something. So we reflect, just what is that? So we go to the ice cream store. What is this? Black cherry. And she can know her own deliberation through, this is a different argument. She can know her own deliberation through introspection. You can be aware of that you're reflecting. There's a part of you that can be aware of your own reflection in the mind, the knower of your own mind. This deliberation. So that kind of knowledge, that's another, this is another marker of the self, knowledge. Requires the same agent that is continuous between the desire to know and the deliberation, such being grasped. Okay, so the same argument. You want to know something. So desire arises to know that thing. And then you start to deliberate about that thing. But that lasts more of a moment. If the desire to know took up a moment, right, you would never have knowledge, because the desire to know would arise and disappear. And then you have to have a desire to know, and then that same, which is an inferential mark of the self desires to know, then the self continues from the desire to know through the process of deliberation, eventually ends up with knowledge. It's got to be the same self. Otherwise, if the self only lasts a moment, that desire, you'd never get past desire, because the next moment wouldn't know anything about the previous moment. There's no overlap. If there was overlap, that would be 2 moments. So the next moment would be a desire to know, and the next moment would be a desire to know, and the next moment, in fact, all reality would just stay static. There wouldn't be any flow in reality. If you really take momentariness to its conclusion, according to the Nyaya point of view. So therefore, they want to establish, remember what they're doing. They're not just trying to argue. They're not just out to like, nah. They're defending Vedanta truths. They're defending their tradition. Their tradition has been undermined. Just like we have to defend it now against material neuroscience. We don't want to go out and fight. We might accept 95% of neuroscience. We just don't accept when somebody comes along and says consciousness is a neuron. No, sorry, right now we're gonna have to have a conversation about that one. The rest of it, we give you namaha for the rest of it. All right then. So all of this is okay. So let's skip this. So all of this, the idea that knowledge, desire, aversion, happiness, and this is an inferential mark for a self. The reason for this is just as was stated above. That is, that there is a self that puts together information from different, here it is, underline this. The same self has to be putting together information from different occasions of experience. First experience, the same self experiences it for the first time. Nice ice cream, yummy, yummy. Next day, it has to be the same self who remembers that experience and says, oh, that was nice yesterday. Let me do it again today. So he's putting together information, like this is sukha, that information is this ice cream is pleasure giving. That's the information from different occasions, from yesterday to my situation today. It has to be the same self that's doing that. If it's a different self, you wouldn't remember it? Because you weren't there yesterday in a momentary ontology. It was a different moment of consciousness. Here's the idea. And now he's going to give you an example. As with a body different from one's own requires analysis. Okay, as with the body different, where's that? Oh, that's in the verse. Yeah, that's coming from another verse. Okay, it doesn't matter. Right, now let's see what you think of this. As with a body different from one's own requires analysis. All right, so this must be coming from, okay, the argument's going to be this. Let me give you a preview. I don't know what my body doesn't know what your body experienced when you ate the Ben and Jerry. I don't know that, so I'm not going to remember your experience because you're a different body. That's the argument. So one moment of self is not going to know about a previous, in a momentary ontology, one moment of consciousness. The next moment's not going to know about that previous moment. There's no overlap any more than my body knows what's going on in your body. I'm completely separate from you. Similarly, the second moment of consciousness is completely different from the first moment of consciousness. My friends, is anybody lost? Are we lost?
No.
Everyone's, how are we doing?
Good.
Everyone switched off the cameras. Why have you switched off the cameras?
It's a lot to take in, but I think I understand where you're going.
Yeah. Do feel free to leave your cameras on. It's more personal. And it's nice to see you. If you know, I mean, unless you're sort of like laid out in your sofa in your PJs, and even then, when no one's judging. All right. Okay. Make the most of it, my friends. I don't know when are you ever going to do this again? Do the tapas. You already got some mileage out of it. Do the tapas. We've only got 3 more sessions. 1.5, 2.5. Hang in there. Okay. So, now, what's this body business? Here is the idea. Proponents of the view that there is no self, meaning no permanent self, would admit that a series of distinct cognitions, right? One moment's different from the next, so each one is distinct. Each cognition is momentary, so it's distinct from the next moment. Each with its own fixed content. The content, let's say anything, but let's just say the content is the Ben and Jerry. You're looking at the Ben and Jerry menu. So the content of your consciousness at that moment is the Ben and Jerry ice cream memory. The next moment, same. All right, each moment is separate, so each has its own fixed content of consciousness. The Ben and Jerry menu. All right, now each could not recognize previous experiences generated in connection with other bodies. So just like I'm not connected to the cognition of another body, my cognition is located in my body. I don't know what some other body is cognizing. So as that is the case, because my body is completely distinct from your body, or each one of us here, all of you up there, your minds right now, all of you have your minds have a content, right? So okay, everybody think of a content. Just think of some random object. Don't tell me what it is. Just think of some stupid thing, a door handle, a vase in your room. Right now, your cognition, your consciousness, you're all cognizant of different things. I'm not. I don't know what each of you just selected because I'm distinct. So as that is the case, because my body and mind is different from your body, the mind, so is Vajrayana's argument. If consciousness was momentary, why would the next moment know what the content of consciousness of the previous moment was? They're separate. There's nothing linking them, because if there was something linking them, that thing would have to link two moments. And then that thing, whatever you call it, a Shakti, call it a power, call it whatever you want, that thing linking one moment to the next moment would have to last 2 moments to link. Think about it. Moment. You want to say, well, they're linked. Well, what that linker has to be in the first moment and has to survive for the second moment to link it. It's lasted 2 moments then, hasn't it? And if you can, all you need to do is demonstrate that something must last 2 moments for you to feel that a momentary ontology doesn't work for you. And that's the Nyaya position. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean they don't accept Buddhism, so many other things about Buddhism. Just like I just told you, that Sankhya and Nyaya have differences about where is happiness and aversion, where are they located, so they differ on that and other things. But otherwise, Nyaya itself says, yeah, you got to do yoga. It sends people off to the yoga teachers, even though it disagrees with yoga about where Sukha, Dukkha, Raga, Dvesha is located. Yoga is going to say Raga, Dvesha is a klesha situated in the chitta. So even though Nyaya and yoga disagree on that thing, Nyaya is still going to, at the end of the day, say, well, okay, we did our work. We use inference to establish a self. Now go off and find a real yoga teacher, and then you can experience it. So they'll agree on so many other things. So likewise, don't think, there was, with Buddhism is a little bit more antagonism, because the Buddhists rejected the Vedic, ultimately all the Vedic texts. They didn't reject them, actually. Buddha never rejected the Vedas, but his teachings then became the canonical, the canon for Buddhists. And then the Buddhist teachings were a placeholder in Buddhism for the Upanishads and the sutras in Vedic traditions. So let's call that a canon. So the canon, the canonical text for Christianity is the Bible. The canonical text for Islam is the Quran and the Hadith. Some Hadith, of course, right. So the canonical texts in Hinduism are the Shruti and the Smriti, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Sutras, the epics. So what happened in Buddhism was, Buddha never says rejected. Nowhere does he say reject the Vedas. He didn't reject them, but he was anti-caste, and he said, no, you want to be a Brahmana, be a real Brahmana. There was criticisms, but never rejection. But his teachings in the course of 400 years, which is a pretty long time, my friends. You think Christianity has a problem with 70 years? 400 years it took Buddhism to the Tripitaka to be formed. So by the time 400 years had sort of taken place, then you had a separate canon in Buddhism based on the teachings of the Buddha. But anyway, there's loads of overlap, like reincarnation, karma, meditation. So, but in this, the Nyaya have to defend. This is non-negotiable, that the self is eternal. And if Buddhists are going to say it's momentary, then they have to, then Nyaya is going to say, well, I'm sorry. We say it's eternal, and here's why. And here's why your momentary model fails. And these are some of the arguments, all right? But don't think that they didn't accept other aspects. You know, they share overlap in many ways. Okay. So it is well known that remembering belongs to the one who had some precise earlier experience. Memory means that the same person had the earlier experience, not a different person. A single creature. For the memory to make sense, I who saw the tree yesterday, I, the same person, am seeing the tree today. The same creature. That's otherwise, how do you account for memory if every moment it's a different existence? One does not remember something experienced by another. I don't remember what you saw yesterday. You're a different person. Same thing. If consciousness is momentary, the second moment of consciousness is different from the previous one. So just as I don't remember what you saw yesterday, in the same way, one moment of consciousness can't remember what a previous moment. There's no overlap. They're completely distinct, just like you and I are distinct. That's what he's saying. One does not remember something by another, or something he himself has never experienced before. For you to remember, you have to have experienced it, not someone else. So in a momentary model, that can't take place, because each moment's distinct from the previous moment. And if you say it's not distinct and there's overlap, then you've created a two-moment model. And now you don't want to do that. If you're a Kshanikavadin. It's Kshanikavadin, one who believes in momentariness. If you want to write it down, because a lot of these arguments are against the Kshana. Kshana means a moment. K-S-A-N-A. Kshana. And Kshanika Vada. Vada means the philosophy of momentariness. In the same way, it is well known that for all sorts of creatures, one does not remember the things found in another experiences. He's repeating himself. Any creature, the dog, it remembers, that whatever, milk is good because that same dog had milk as a puppy. Right, here it is, directly referring to the Buddhists now. Proponents of the no Ātman. Ātman. The Hindus, the Buddhists are sometimes called Atman. Atmavada is the philosophy of Atman. Write it down. Atma, Vada means a philosophy. And Vadin is the person who believes in the philosophy. So you're all asana Vadins. You all believe in, or Vadinis, you all believe in asana. So the Vedic schools are all Atmavadins. They differ. Advaita Vedanta differs a bit, they say Atman is cosmic and universal, and Vaishnavas say, no, it's individual and pluralistic. Doesn't matter. I mean, if for this point, it doesn't matter. It matters for other points. But they all accept there's an Atman that is Sat, eternal. Now, whether it's individual and there are plurality, or whether there's only one, then that's a secondary discussion. But foundationally and fundamentally, they all accept a Sat. That's why you have Sat, Chid, Ananda. The first thing is Sat. That there is an ongoing Atman, whether it's cosmic, individual. That's chapter number 2. Chapter number 1, everybody, okay? So that's Atman. Now, those who challenge that and say, no, it's not Sat, it's momentary, they're Un. Un is a negator, like Vidya, Avidya, Klishta, Aklishta. So the un-Atmavadins is another name for the Buddhists. So we've had two names now. We have the Kshanika Vadins. Write it down, Rhonda. Come on, you're getting to be a sophisticated intellectual citizen of the yogic world. So Kshanika, look at that. So that Kshanika, the momentariness people, the Kshanika Vadins, or easier to remember, Atma Vadins, or Vada. Vada is the philosophy, Vadin, like yogin or and female yogini, Vadini, in ini. My daughter's name is Mohini, which means the possessor of, she's the enchantress. She possesses moha. So her name is Mohini. So everybody calls her Mo. All the Sanskrit kind of elegance evaporates into Mo, but that's the form. Okay, so Anatmavadins, that's what he's going to use now. Let's see what he's going to say. What about these Anatmavadins? Here they are. So proponents of the Anatma view, right? Dusty's translated Atma. An is no, Atman is self. So you may run into this in modern, modern high street Buddhist texts. The no self, but why the strange language? No self is because that's anatma. The proponents, meaning the Buddhists, view cannot account for either of these occurrences. What can they not account for? The fact that one remembers things from one's own past experience. For Vatsyayana's point of view, the Buddhists can't account for memory. That one, a conscious entity, a knower, remembers things from the same knower's own past experience, not some other moments of consciousness. One remembers things from one's own past experiences, and that what one does not remember things from the experience of other people. I don't remember things you experienced yesterday. So just as I remember things I experienced yesterday. Number one, I must be the same person today as I was yesterday. For me today to recognize the thing that me yesterday encountered. So the same me must have survived. And also I don't remember what you saw yesterday. So in that same way, one moment of consciousness couldn't remember something of a previous moment of consciousness because they're completely distinct. I hope you get it, my friends, because he's going to go on about it. There's going to be other arguments. In contrast, right now, he's saying, let's be clear, no self-view cannot account for either of these. He's now being right in your face, blunt, polite, but he's saying, our view, which is the Vedic view, can account for memory. The momentary people cannot. And he's now just being straight, putting it right out on the table. So in contrast to the momentariness people who can't account for memory, in contrast, matters as we have presented them, namely that, and what's really at stake, that there is a self, that it is the same today as it was yesterday, because it's sat, and sat means ongoing. It's the present active participle of the verb to be. So it's being, and being is a continuum of beingness, of awareness. But our point of view accords well with the phenomena described. We can explain it. Memory. Take it or leave it. This is Nyaya. And their dharma is to defend Vedic truth claims. Specifically, the one they're interested in is the eternality, the ongoingness, the unchanging nature of the Atman. Accepted by everyone. Vedanta, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaishya, the 6 schools, and more besides. That they accept. Buddhists don't. So therefore that camp, the Vaidika camp, the Vaidikas are those who You know, even if they're not really interested in the Upanishads, they accept them. They have the Vaidika school. Amongst those who are Vaidikas, some don't care about what Buddhists say. They go into the Vritti Nirodha, fine. Some don't care about what Buddhists say. Oh, we'll study Vedanta, you know, we'll do our thing. So, some don't care. But amongst those who do care and who feel that they have a duty, just like amongst the yoga community, maybe people don't care what scientists say. Maybe people care, but they're not interested in conversation. But a few people somehow or other feel this dharmic urge or inclination that they need to defend yogic, you know, the claim to an Atman. So the Nyayikas are doing that back then. Right, Udyotkara, another commentator. Since the items mentioned in the sutra, right, the 6 inferential signs of the self, come to be fused with fixed content provided by memory, they all prove that there is a single observer, a single subject. For recognition, it's just repeating it, could not occur if there were a plurality of subjects. Why don't we go along with the repetition? It's tricky stuff. If they're repeating it, it's repeating it for its pedagogy. Let's see how he maybe uses different language. If there was a plurality of moments, the second moment, why would it remember what the content of the first moment? The content of memory, the first moment has a Ben and Jerry ice cream in its awareness. The second moment's completely distinct. Why would it have the same content? And if it doesn't have the same content, how do you account for memory? Memory means that you recognize something that you experience. All right, I'll keep going. Right. For recognition, memory could not occur if there were a plurality of subjects, a plurality of cognitively fixed contents. Each, right, subjects meaning moments of awareness. Each of them has a fixed content. It's only one moment, and it's fixed on the Ben and Jerry ice cream. That's the content of that particular moment. That's cognitively fixed content. A cognition has a content. If you cognize something, that thing you cognize is the content of your cognition. It's fixed, right, for a moment at least. And a plurality of causes for the ideas put together. Right. The ideative flows of sights, tastes, smells, and touches are not made to come together to form a recognition of their own. There has to be conscious. The actual content itself is not going to remember itself. It's just a dead samskara in the mind. There has to be a conscious observer to connect consciousness, the memory, experience number one. The next day becomes memory. There has to be something separate from that to connect it. Nor is it true that my visual experience is the past is something I am able to touch later. Let's skip that one because we're running out of the time. In other words, your taste experience is not going to remember your visual experience. If you saw an ice cream yesterday and you taste it today, well, that if you didn't have a self that's putting it together, if there wasn't the same self who saw it yesterday, is the same. I didn't taste it yesterday. I saw it yesterday, and then today, looking at it was interesting to me. So then I thought, let me give it a go the next day, and I taste it. So I have to be the same person who saw has to be the same person who tasted, because the taste isn't going to put together the memory. The experience of taste, isn't going to say, oh, I the taste experience saw it yesterday, because taste is taste. It's got nothing to do with sight. So you can't say taste is the locus of memory. The taste is just a vibration on the tongue. So that's another argument again. Now, furthermore, it is wrong that when something has been seen by Devadatta, okay, this is the different body argument. Devadatta in Sanskrit is like in English, we would say Fred Smith or Joe Bloggs. What would you say in Jane Doe, I think, right? It's a sort of generic person. I think it's Jane Doe. In America, you use the term Jane Doe. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. So you want to refer to people, you say, let Jane Doe represent any, Tom, Dick, and Harry. That's another one. Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's not literally a Tom and a Dick and a Harry, but it just refers to, viene la signora, vado su. Vieni Lakshman, ti presento. Vieni. Are vieni. Right. Furthermore, it is wrong that when something has been seen by Devadatta, that very thing seen is recognized by Yajnadatta. These are two different people. If Devadatta saw something, well, it's not going to be recognized by Yajnadatta. If Tom saw something, well, Dick and Harry are not going to remember it. So our Tom, Dick, and Harry in Sanskrit is Devadatta, Yajnadatta, and there's another one, Devadatta, Yajnadatta, and something else. Nor do we find it said, whatever Devadatta has directly experienced in the past, I, Yajnadatta, have thusly experienced. We don't say that. Devadatta experienced it, and that now I, Yajnadatta, are experiencing the same thing. No, because we're completely different people. Likewise with moments of consciousness, they're completely different. What's the reason for all this? It's because distinct cognitions have fixed content of their own. If a moment of consciousness has its cognition, the next moment is a separate moment and it has its cognition. The second moment is not going to remember the first moment if it is, as the Buddhists say, completely distinct. And if it's not completely distinct, then the question is, well, what's the same about it then? And Buddhists are going to say, no, every moment is completely distinct from the previous one. So you're trying to push the Buddhists into a corner. And if you can get the Buddhists to admit, well, yes, there is something that is transferred they're not going to, from one moment to the next, then that, again, I'm repeating myself, that thing that's handled like the baton has to last at least 2 moments. Having fixed contents of their own, cognitions mutually exclude one another. By nature, my cognition is not yours. Our nature, you're in your body, I'm mine, and our nature excludes. I have no privileged access to your cognition, you do not to mine. That's nature. So one moment is completely distinct from another, according to this Buddhist view. This is accepted by those who deny the self's existence. Buddhists accept that Yajnadatta doesn't know what Devadatta saw yesterday, so he's saying even a Buddhist accepts that. And this is accepted even by those who deny the self's existence. On their view, the Buddhist momentary view, we should not expect any acts of recognition. Underscore that. The way Nyaya is presenting Buddhism, and they're pretty good. Don't think they're misrepresenting. I do think this is a challenge, just as I think Advaita Vedanta has a challenge explaining what Maya is. On their view, we shouldn't expect any recognition because each moment's distinct. So why would it recognize the previous moment? Okay, I don't know whether I'm overstating the case, but like I told you before, you'll have forgotten it all by next week. Therefore, that which brings together content into a recognition is precisely a self. You need a self that survives from one moment to the next, survives from yesterday when I saw Ben and Jerry to today when I desire Ben and Jerry. That has to be the same self. All right, we're going to skip a little bit now. And let's move on to another argument. Now, let's go now. Udyotkara. Some say, all right, so there's sometimes difference of opinion between the commentators, right? Let's go back to the verse. This is going to be on your midterm exam. Oh, sorry, you're not in Rutgers, all right. If you're in Rutgers, this will be on your midterm exam. Inferential marks for the self are desire, aversion, effort, pleasure, pain, and knowledge, right? Inferential mark of the fire, smoke. Desire, right? Raga dvesha, you know this. Sukha dukkha, effort, also known as free will, and jnana, also known as consciousness. Okay? Let's pick on someone up there. Who are we going to pick on? Peter Donahue, what are the 6 inferential markers of the self? Unmute yourself, my friend, please.
Sukha, dukkha,
Raga,
raga, dvesha, jnana, and effort.
effort, excellent, well done. Who did we not pick on? Christopher. If 3 people get it right, we're off. The whole group is off the hook. 6 inferential markers of the self.
Raga, dvesha, effort, knowledge, sukha, dukkha. That's desire and aversion, happiness and suffering, and then the effort and the free will.
Effort and consciousness, also known as here.
Or sorry, yeah, sorry, I was mistaken. That you said effort and free will. Those are like the same in this theory. And then knowledge. I forgot to say knowledge. Thank you.
And knowledge is what
Consciousness.
Yeah. Dorothy thought she was going to get away with it. There she is, Dorothy. 6 inferential markers of the self. You have to unmute, Dorothy.
I was very proud of myself for rattling them right off. Sukha, dukkha, raga, dvesha,
Yeah.
effort, and knowledge.
Yes. Okay. La Rudraksha. Let's see if all this Go Saver. Let's see if it is. Have you dissolved into Raj Bhakti? You've gone beyond the logical mind. Why do we need inferential markers in the first place, Rudraksha?
You're asking me?
Yeah, your name's Rudraksha. See, he's done all this Go Saver. He's forgotten his material identity now. He's absorbed in the Atman and his deep level identity. He's gone beyond gender and race and nomenclature. Go ahead, Rudraksha. Why do we need this inferential business in the first place? Come on. John. Are bhaiya? John. Would you like to try that, John Stoper? Why are we doing all this? What's with this inferential?
Well, you need a sign. You need a sign.
We need a sign. Why do we need a sign? John Philo. John Philo.
Because
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, yeah.
we need a sign because we can't see it immediately, like we can
Well
see
done.
fire. But if we can't see the fire, we need a sign for it.
We do. Nyaya acknowledges. Better you see it. The only way you're really going to know it, the only way you're really going to know the fire is to see the fire. The smoke will give you is an indicator. It's a sign. It tells you there is a fire. It doesn't tell you anything about what kind of a fire, how bright, how big, how orange, how anything. Maybe a little bit of information. Okay, you need to see it to really know it. So therefore, what's the other 2 sources of knowledge then? El Grabar. El Grabar. All right, let's get back to our text. So the other 2 sources of knowledge give you indirect information. They don't give you direct. Only experience gives you direct. But before you sit down and meditate, to get your direct experience, you have to first have some reasonable some reason to think that there is this Atman. You have to have a reason to think there is an Atman. If it's going to take you 50 years to experience it, during that time, you are operating on faith. So you need to, your faith should be, based on more than just random idea. It has to be based on some solid reasoning. Okay, words are fine, and that's good, and Vedanta. So Nyaya wants to provide you some intellectual equipment to have the faith, coupled with the Upanishadic teachings, to then embark on the path of seeking the experience for yourself. That's how it fits together. including Vedanta. All that svadhyaya is bolstering our faith that there is an Atman. Stories of great beings who went in the past, the teachings themselves, the life histories, the hagiographies, none of that gives us experience, my friends. Words, they don't give us experience, but they nourish our faith in it. And Nyaya says, very good, very good. But we're going to give you another tool to strengthen your commitment to the path. We're going to show you that logical reasoning supports it, and logical reasoning rejects. Remember the tarka? You clear the ground. We got to clear the ground of this momentary idea. We're going to clear the ground of this materialism idea that consciousness is material. That's going to be in this chapter. Let's clear the ground of opposing views. And then the man left standing is going to be the Vedanta view. We can't give you the experience, but we can clear the ground of other claimants to the throne of what the self is. We can clear the ground through logic and debate and discussion. Vaidika view remains. Now go do yoga with the Patanjali over there in the other corner of the forest. See how it all works, Judith? Right, back to the text. Right. Repeating himself. I mean, shall we repeat ourselves? I feel like we should follow in the footsteps of the Acharyas, but same thing. Okay, let's move on. So we skip that. Skip that. Skip that. Okay, here's the second argument. Now we move on to a completely different argument. There's going to be like 3 or 4 arguments presented. Notice the first one is from Nyaya point of view, the most powerful, accounting for memory. Now here's the second one, and this is still circulating in philosophy departments. It's very interesting, and I actually found the proto form of this argument in the Upanishads. Proto meaning an early kind of, form of it. In the Upanishads, it says, who is the God that joins hearing and seeing? In typical Upanishad language. Who is the God that joins hearing and seeing? Here's a quick preview. You can see, we've said it, we've had it before. You can see something, hear something, touch something, all at the same moment. There has to be someone joining them. If hearing was just hearing, there was no self, no joiner, and hearing was just hearing, and touching was just touching, then the touch wouldn't know what the ear is hearing. Vibrations going into the ear, it causing an experience, and then the hand touching the same thing. Who's going to put them together? There'd be 2 completely different sensations. There wouldn't be any but you can hear something, smell it, touch it, and so forth, all at the same time. So that's the argument. Let's see how it works. Because one, the same thing, grasps the same object through sight and touch, you can add all 5 senses. He's just gonna show you work with 2, but actually, if you establish 2, then you've established 5. There is, because one grasps the same object through sight and touch, because of that, there is a self that is distinct from the body and sense organs, right? So the sense organs are, one of them is grasping, one of them is the eye. What does the eye do? It grasps through sight. And what does the organ of touch, the sense of touch do? It grasps through touch. So these are the sense organs. And what is the body? Body is nothing other than the collection of sense organs. So don't get confused by the language. Now, because something is grasping the same object, not different objects, right? Because I can see the food and taste it at the same time and smell it. So because one grasps the same object through sight and touch, there must be a self that is distinct from the sense organs, right? Vatsyayana. Some particular object is grasped by sight. The same object is grasped by touch. That very thing which I saw with my eyes, I'm now feeling through my sense of touch. And that very thing which I felt through my sense of touch, I'm now seeing with my eyes. Here's the point. The two instances of mental content that are directed towards one and the same objects have, in being comprehended, a single subject, right? So the same thing is, apple is seen and it's touched. So it's the same single object, but it's been apprehended by two senses. You could say five senses, but let's go with two. And it is not the case that the subject comprehending the two is simply the aggregate of bodily cards. It's not that the comprehender of the two together is just a combination of the two. No, because each of the two has its own different fixed contents. Touch is only touching. Seeing is only seeing. They're not fusing together. There needs someone, a conscious observer, to fuse them together. There needs to be the same one who's conscious of the sight, has to be the same one who's conscious of the touch. Touch and sight themselves are not going to be conscious of each other because they're just vibrations of material energy. Right. Nor does there come to be a single subjectivity through the activity of any particular sense organ. And no one sense organ is going to be have a subjective awareness of the other sense organs. There needs to be something separate from all five of them. Touch is not going to be the same argument. The touch is not going to be the sense of touch itself without an observer, without a conscious, without the Atman. Touch itself is not going to be aware of what the ear is doing. The organs are functioning independently. There needs to be something else to put them together. Now, you see how this is different from the previous argument? The previous argument is continuity over time. The same, based on, to explain memory. To explain memory, the same something has to survive. The thing that experienced something, the tree today, has to be the same entity that recognizes it tomorrow. So that's an argument that there has to be something, a continuum, the same thing has to exist over time. This is a different argument that in any one moment, that if you are experiencing tasting, touching, smelling, etc. at the same time, there has to be a unifier that's unifying them, because those things cannot know each other without a unifier. Touch cannot know hearing. That's the argument. Let's see how he frames it. Thus, the grasper of one and the same object by the visual organ and the organ of touch comprehends two instances of mental contact about one and the same thing, two instances of mental content that have distinct causal complexes and distinct instrumental causes, right? So the touch, there's a causal complex. My hand goes out and the atoms of my skin touch and feel the skin of the apple. So that's a causal complex. There's a complex of causes that that lie behind the sense of touch, and a completely different complex of causes that go behind seeing. Seeing is different causes. The light has to bounce off the apple and hit my retina, and I don't know, go upside down and all that stuff. That's a different series of processes than the experience of touch. So they're completely different. So how is it that one can do both at the same time? Sight cannot. The complex of causes and processes of sight is different from touch. So that complexity of causes of sight cannot account for the experience of touch. And how does he put it? The causal complexes of touch are completely different than causal complexes of sight. They're completely different systems. So they are not going to know each other because their causal complexes are different. But if I'm aware of both at the same instant, I can't account from that, from without positing something different from them that's aware of them both at the same time. That's consciousness. It's not a bad argument. Still in circulation. I don't know why it doesn't get more mileage. that one in a special category. It's a special because it can do things. Each sense can only do one thing. The ear can only hear, and the nose can only smell, and touch can only touch. But there's some special thing that can be aware of them all simultaneously. Now the question, the opponent, how again is it that the mere functioning of the sense organs cannot bring about a single subjectivity for both instances of content? So the student asks, well, why is it? Why can't you just say that it's the senses that's bringing about cognition? Why do you have to posit this other thing, right? Occam's razor, you want to keep things as light as possible. You don't want to introduce unnecessary entities. Why are you introducing an Ātman? Let the sense itself be the cause of its own, of awareness. So why can't you do that, says the question. Answer, it is true that a sense organ is capable in a sense of comprehension in terms of grasping and repeatedly transmitting its particular content itself to a subject who endures the passage of time, but it does not grasp the other content which belongs to another sense faculty. Right? So the student wants to know, why can't the senses account for consciousness? Well, no, because the sense, even if we allow that the sense, which you can question, but so the Vatsyayan is saying, let's allow that the sense itself can be conscious of its content. Let's allow that the sense is conscious, the sense of touch is conscious, it's responsible for consciousness of touch, but it can't know sound. It can't be the cause of consciousness of sound because there's a different complex of things that go into the experience of sound. So it's the same argument. Answer. And then the question, well, why is it that an aggregate of bodily parts can't bring about a single subjectivity for both instances? Why can't we, the aggregate of all the senses, they all come together and they bring about, notice the point, a single subjectivity, not 5 different things. There's an awareness of a single thing. You see the apple, taste the apple, touch the apple, there's a single subjectivity. Then the opponent says, why do we have to say there's an Atman doing that? Let the 5 come together, and the 5, the aggregate of them, produce consciousness, a 5-fold experience of the apple. Answer, because he is one and the same who is conscious of the 2 instances, right? Taste and of touch. It's the same one, not 5 different things. 2 instances of mental content that have distinct instrumental causes. They're distinct. And he goes back to the same point. Touch can only touch. Smell can only smell. Ear can only, they can't come together and merge. They're only instrumentally capable of doing one thing. They can't perform the indriya function of the other. So you need something different from them all to be, if we can have an experience of all 5, which we can, then there must be something other than the 5 of them, senses. They're only instrumentally capable. Their causal complexes all work in different ways. And therefore they can only produce at best one cognition. And even if we allow that cognition is conscious, which Vatsyayan is not going to allow, but for argument's sake, let's say each one is conscious of its own content, right? Not that it is, because consciousness, but let's say, if I play devil, let's give them benefit. Let's for argument's sake, let's say the smell, the whole the complex, the causal complex of smell produces its own consciousness. Let's allow that for a moment. Fine, but that of hearing produces consciousness of hearing. How would they come together? They'd be 2 completely different, jarringly different consciousnesses. But experience tells us that we can be conscious of both. Well, the explanation of that can't be the individual sense experiences then, because they can't combine them. Because he is one and the same who is conscious of the 2 instances of mental control those that have distinct instrumental causes. Nose has its distinct method. Ear has its distinct, instrumentation. But it's the one and the same self as subject. No aggregate could be conscious of all of them all. And the question is why? Because each item within such an aggregate of bodily parts would continue to fail to comprehend the other. Even if you bring the five together, the nose is still only going to be aware of smell. The ear is still only going to be, it's made that way. It's nature, it's instrumental causal complex, as he puts it. Only allows it to have one thing as its content. The nose can only smell, the eye can only see. So even if you brought them together, they still be trapped in their own individual epistemologies. See the argument? Even within an aggregate, each item, still it would continue to fail to comprehend the other instances of mental content, like the case of a sense organ, right? A sense organ cannot grasp another sense organ's content. But the eye doesn't have any connection at all with what the nose is doing and experiencing. There we are, my friends. Nyaya. So then he goes back to the memory argument. The very restriction of sense organs to their own proper content. Each sense is restricted, only has access to its sense object. Eye to the eye. That very restriction is the reason, a new argument, different from the memory argument. There must be a combiner. Is a reason to suppose, right, the inferential reason, the mark, well, no, it's not quite a mark of the self, but it's a reason to suppose the existence of the self. Thus, the self-existence is not contested. There's no way of contesting that, according to Nyaya. You have to posit a unifier. Vatsyayana, let us suppose a sense organ did not have content that was restricted, right? So this is, see how they're philosophically liberal. Say, all right, let's suppose, right? These are intellectuals. Let us suppose that a sense object did not have content that was restricted to one sensory modality, right? So let's say that, right? Let's see what, let him say what he wants to say, then as an all-cognizing, all-content grasping conscious thing, we wouldn't have to infer a conscious being over and above that. If it were the case that the eye could also smell and taste and touch, and each of them, could experience the experience of the other sense. If that were the case, he's saying, yeah, well, if that were the case, we wouldn't have to infer a conscious being over and above that. If each of them be conscious of what the others was doing, yeah, you're right. We wouldn't need to say there's something else. But no, that's not the fact. It is because the sense organs are restricted in content that there has to be something else. If that wasn't the case, he says to the opponent, yeah, you'd be right. We would defer to you. You'd have a point. We couldn't use that argument anymore. We'd have to find another argument. But you'd be right. You'd take away that argument from our arsenal. If it were the case, hypothetical. In language, you call that contrafactual. If it were raining today, the garden will be, it's not raining today. So if you say, if it were raining, the plants will be watered, that's called a contrafactual tense in grammar, because it's contrary to the fact. So the fact is, it's not raining. If it were raining, then blah, 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 blah. So the contrafactual, if it were the case that any one sense could do the others, yeah, you're right. We wouldn't have to posit an Atman, but because the sense organs are restricted in content, then there has to be something else. And what's the other thing? A conscious being capable of cognizing everything. Consciousness can pervade the five sense organs. Its consciousness is not restricted like the sense organs are, right? Pratyahara, you're bringing consciousness in from what? The five senses, all five of them. So there has because consciousness can pervade all five, because that's the only way of explaining. There has to be something that can pervade all five to account for the fact that we can simultaneously touch, see, smell, hear the same thing. So there has to be something else, a conscious being capable of cognizing anything, a grasper of content, right? The consciousness is sometimes called a grasper because it grasps it. It's the grahana, the grahitra. It grasps the different contents. A grasper of content of whatever sort transcendent to that which is restricted in content. The sense is restricted. Eye to sight, nose to smell, touch to feeling. They're restricted. Nose cannot see, eye cannot hear. They're restricted. But something unrestricted can cognize them all at the same time. That's a pretty damn good argument, my friends. Carol, Zaleski, come on, let's give Nyaya a thumbs up on that one. Rudraksh, Jai Jai Bolo, Nyaya ki Jai Jai Bolo. Okay, back to this. Are we doing okay for time? 7:58. Yeah, these are the two main arguments, actually. Let's just read this. It is easy to illustrate that such undeniable recognition as we have sketched out occurs in a conscious being. So we're kind of summarizing now. A person who sees something such as a ripening fruit. Now he's I think he's summarizing. Let's see, can't remember. A person who sees something such as a ripening fruit that has a certain shape and color. Okay, forget that. But what about language? Hearing letters ordered sequentially, one is able to recognize a word in a sentence. Even for language to occur, even a word like Patanjali, a word is a sequence in time. It's not like Om. So there has to be someone at the end of that word who puts together the four phonemes. If it was momentary, then you'd only hear pa, and the next moment would hear ta, and the next moment would hear un, and there would be no awareness of a word, or what to speak of a sentence, what to speak of language. Think about it, right? So all you have to use one word as an illustration, and then of course the sentence is words put together, and then you have language. There could be no language if there was only momentariness, because the next moment wouldn't even know what the previous phoneme was, what to speak about the previous sentence. Now, that's what he's going to say. Let's see him say it. So hearing letters ordered sequentially, one is able to recognize a word in a sentence, and cognizing a fixed verbal arrangement in a sentence, one grasps complex content produced by it. So we get meaning from a whole. So if I say to you, in yoga, the goal of yoga is, to experience, pure consciousness. So that's the content. The content of that requires that you survive. First, you have to survive to put the words together. Then you have to survive long enough to put the words together into a sentence. And only then can you grasp meaning. So you couldn't have language unless you had a permanent self doing all that putting together of language. So hearing letters ordered sequentially, one is able to recognize a word in a sentence and cognizing a fixed verbal arrangement, right? But if you read the subject, object, verb, right? That's verbal arrangement in a sentence. If language is uttered grammatically correctly, then one grasps complex content, a complex thing that if you do yoga, you realize your deep self. That's complex. It's a complex there's deep meaning there. But in order to get to that deep meaning, you have to know what words are. You have to know the relationship of words. But the point they want to make here is the same person has to be doing all of that. So that person has to survive more than a moment. All this, which spans various arrangements and modalities, right? Grammar and verbs and all of that must be cognized by a being. Then back to the point, the same being capable of cognizing anything, and not just through one specific mode of presentation. It can't just be the ear hearing it. It can't be the eye reading it. Someone has to be putting it all together and remembering. Someone has to remember what the word the means. Somebody has to remember. I know what the means because I went to school when I was 5. I know what yoga sutras are because I ran into the word 10 years ago. So all of that requires they're banging away at the same point. There has to be an Atman. All of this is about establishing an Atman, and not just a momentary Atman, which they call an-Atman. If you say it's momentary, they would say you're not talking about the same thing we are, so you're talking about an-Atman. You're not talking about the Atman we're talking about. What you're talking about, this momentary consciousness, from our point of view, is an-Atman. It's not the Atman that the Vedas told us, so it's an-Atman. On the heels of this argument, you cannot just turn our point on its head. You can't just reject what you give us some good arguments if you want to challenge us. A simple case is all that is needed for illustration. Simple case. What Yajnadatha experienced yesterday, Devadatta doesn't experience today. Simple. Thus, what you put forth, the momentary people, was what you put forth, that given that there is consciousness in the sense organs, there is no use positing a conscious being over and above them, is wrong. Actually, this is an argument against materialists, maybe, or some form of quasi-materialism. So this is not a momentary argument. Sorry, I take that back. Momentary argument was the previous one, memory. This is the that there has to be a conscious, you can't say the senses are responsible, because at best the sense can only do what it is organically, naturally, constitutionally made to do. The ear to hear, the eye to see. You couldn't put them together. All right, so that's our second argument, for my friends. Now, what do you want to do? It is now 2 hours. We should take questions, and these are actually the two main arguments. So, do you want to continue with the Atman another week, or do you? These are really the basic arguments, or you think, okay, you kind of get it. Then with one argument, maybe what's the difference between a dead body and a live body? All other properties are the same. At the moment of death, the other properties, color, shape, form, texture, the same. So there has to be. So therefore, if you say that consciousness is material, well, all material properties are the same. Then how do you account that the body is now dead? If all material properties are the same. So therefore, that's another argument. Therefore, there has to be something else that demarcates a dead body from a live body. And it can't be a material thing, because the matter of the two bodies are the same. The moment before death, all the atoms are there, everything's there, spinning about. The next moment, there's still heat in the body, the color is still there, the shape, all these other material properties are still there. But one is dead and one is live. So then you can't account for the difference by material properties, because the material properties are the same. So therefore, you have to posit something else. That's the fourth argument. I'll show you where he summarizes. You might find this. So listen, maybe we've had enough of this, and we can hear. Look, let's just go to 85. And you can just read this. Among several arguments in favor of a self in Nyaya Sutra, chapter 3, we have reviewed 3. Well, we've only done 2, really. First, diachronic recognition of one thing at 2 times. That's the first argument. To account for diachronic means sequencing in time. From yesterday to today, my memory of the tree I saw, Ben and Jerry's, we were saying, the Ben and Jerry I tasted yesterday, I see it again today, recognize it today, whether it was a raga dvesha experience, doesn't matter, but there has to be continuum of the self to account for recognition. First argument, page 85. Second, so that's diachronic, that means across time. Synchronic, at one moment. Synchronic perceptual synthesis concerning one thing through 2 distinct sensory transmissions. So this is not diachronic, which is across time, but synchronic. At one moment, something is putting together, experiencing touch, taste, smell at the same time. Second argument. C, moral or karmic continuity. Oh, I think we should look at this. Do you want to stay for another 10 minutes? rather than have a whole other session. Because I think, we kind of get it. But let's look at the karma argument. Basically, it's going to say it's a diachronic one. If I do a deed and I'm momentary, and then my karma comes back to me next life or tomorrow, well, if I'm momentary, then the person that gets the karma is not going to be me, is it? So then you get hit for something you didn't do. How is that morally acceptable? That's the karma argument. Let's have a quick look at it. And then we'll call it a day. And then I feel we did it. I think the argument is here. Look, it's only a page, my friend. When a living body is harmed, no sin would be incurred if there was no self, right? Himself. So, okay, so if I kick you, in one moment, I'm gone. And now I, the kicker, someone has to kick me, this life or the next. Drishta janma vedaniya. So the person that gets the karma back is not the one that did the deed in momentariness. So you'd have an absurd, and Buddhists do accept karma. So in the Buddhist model of momentariness, the person getting the karma is not the one that did the deed. Let's read it. Now, Vatsyayana. Use of the word body in the sutra is meant to express the aggregate of body, center. Don't worry about this. Now, one who, for example, burns a living body causes harm to the living being, committing a wicked act called sin. Let's say you burn, eat a live lobster and you burn it alive. I don't know. You burn something alive. Now, no sin means that for those who deny a permanent self, the Buddhists, there would be no connection between the agent of sin and its results. Now, I think you should get the argument now. We don't need to belabor it. It's a different self. The one that did the sin would be gone in a moment. Conversely, there would be a relationship between the results and someone other than the agent. The results would come a moment later, or a trillion moments later in the next life. A trillion different moments later. There's a different momentary being. Indeed, in the flowing series of body, senses, cognition, and awareness, right? Buddhists talk of a flow. It's like the river. Every moment is different, but there is this sort of flow. Well, Nyaya is going to say, well, that's too vague. What is connecting the moments of the flow? They're not going to accept this vague metaphor of the flow of reality. They're going to say, okay, well, what is the connector from one moment to the next? Now, indeed, in the flowing series of body scent, right, in the Buddhist, everything is momentary flow. One aggregate would arise. So one moment, an aggregation. So your body, your senses, your sight, your mind, your consciousness, even the world, it all only lasts for not just you, but the world itself only lasts for a moment. The next moment is a different aggregate. So one aggregate would arise while another is terminated. The previous moment's terminated. And that these in a sequence in the form of a stream. So Buddhists say it's a sequence as a stream of arising and terminating. And he's saying, even if you say all that, it wouldn't mitigate the problem of the agent's otherness, right? The agent is other, different from the agent is the one who did the deed, and the person receiving it is the receiver. So the agent's otherness, the agent would be gone in a moment. So he's other. The person receives it is another moment, so it's otherness. Since each individual aggregate of body, etc., would stand distinct from every other. Each moment is different. So if each moment is different, then the moment I did the deed is different from the moment that receives the fruit. So where's the justice in that? So for the fact that each stands distinct from every other, it is widely understood. And so this being the case, the living being in the form of an aggregate of body, etc., who causes harm. So here I am, I'm an aggregate, meaning I'm a body, and my body is an aggregate. I got limbs, I got organs, I've got my 5 senses, right? The karma indriyas, gyan indriyas as an aggregate. Aggregate means a compilation of things, or kind of brought together. So that aggregate is just a clunky way of talking about a person. So that, where are we? So that aggregate, sorry, for the fact that each stands distinct from every other is widely understood. And so this being the case, the living being in the form of an aggregate of body, etc., who causes harm, would not be the one connected to the karmic fruits of harm. And the one who would be connected would not be the one who caused the harm. The one who gets hit with the karma, he didn't do anything. He just, it arises in one moment, bang. In that one moment, he's experiencing some horrible karma. He's like, well, what did I do? That karma was caused by, some moment in a previous life. From Nyaya's point of view, it's absurd. Thus, on the view that there are distinct beings, even if they're in a series, each a momentary flow of series, apart from, now he's saying, let's forget about the problem of how does one series connected to the, how is one moment connected to the next? That's a problem, but let's put that aside for a minute. Even if you, just ignore that problem, you run into this other problem. That's on the view that there are distinct beings in a series, as opposed to what Nyaya is suggesting, a single enduring self. So then that self that did the harm is the same self in the next lifetime who gets the karma. Well, that makes sense. But you have to have that same self for that to make for that to be morally sensible. There results the unacceptable consequence. From Nyaya's point of view, it's unacceptable consequence of losing what one has done. You did something good, but you don't get the fruit because you only last a moment. That's not a very acceptable consequence. And acquiring what one has not done, you didn't do a bad thing, but you get hit with it because of some previous moment. Further, if it is true that an entirely new being arises and is terminated constantly, individuals not be shaped through the causal influence of karma. You couldn't, you say I'm a product of my karma, but you have to be the same you to be molded by karma. So I'm born into, Patanjali says, into a certain jati boga, ayo jati boga, and I, already as a baby, I have sort of, samskara is activated for this life. I have my little personality. Well, for all that to make sense, for me to be molded by karma, it has to be the same me that did the deeds in the first place. And then he goes on, in religious ways of life, such as celibacy, right? The tapas, brahmachari, yamas, niyamas, which Buddhists accept. So here we have overlap. Hindus respect the Buddhist practices, no question. They have the same 5 yamas, exactly 4 of the same 5, 4 of them. They have ahimsa, satyam, brahmacharya, asteya, and then the last one, they have no intoxication instead of whatever the 5th yama is. You all know better than me by now. So the Buddhists have the first 4, and then they add no intoxication. So basically the same thing. Well, Hindus respect that. Respect their meditation, respect their tapas. I mean, Buddhist monks did amazing tapas. But they're not going to accept, they can't just ignore a challenge to their fundamental siddhanta. Remember the word siddhanta, non-negotiable truth of a tradition. You have to respond. If you don't respond, then you're not an intellect. You don't have an intellectual tradition. Philosophy, that's what philosophy is. You have to, when you come up with a philosophy, you have to engage what every other philosopher has said, and you have to show why you disagree or why your position is different, or how you're going to treat things. Otherwise, then don't say anything. They go meditate. That's fine too. If you're gonna go into the public sphere and present your siddhanta, you have to present it in communication and distinction with other points of view. Otherwise, you're just a fanatic. You're just speaking your thing, and you're not engaging. You're not aware of anybody else. Well, you're closed-minded. Then that's narrow-minded. You don't want that. So they have to respond to the Buddhist thing, and again, karma, it becomes incoherent in a momentary ontology, and religious ways of life as celibacy for the sake of liberation would be meaningless, because you, the one that practices celibacy, is not going to be the one that gets moksha. because the ones are only momentary. So if the living being were merely an aggregate of body, when a person was burned and harmed, no sin would be incurred. You wouldn't get the sin. You cause harm to somebody else, but you wouldn't get hit with it because you only last a moment. This view is unacceptable. Therefore what? We remember, you're not just arguing. You're clearing the ground. Tarka. Remember tarka. You're getting rid of undesirable views that conflict with yours. And then you establish your view based on pramanas. This kind of argumentation does not give you knowledge, but it clears the ground of unwanted, interfering alternatives. And then your view remains standing. And then you say, okay, now do yoga. Now do yoga. So therefore, the self is something other than the aggregate of body, and it endures the passage of time, and therefore it does something, and it gets the karma in the next life. Final passage. On the Buddhist view, said Ujotkara, there could be no effort for liberation, since it would be achieved without effort. You wouldn't even, a whole new point. He's being a little bit sarcastic here, a bit naughty. He's saying, well, you'd be liberated every moment then. You, the self, right? What is the whole point of yoga? To free the self from suffering. Well, if the self lasts a moment, then, well, you're liberated every moment. What do you need to do yoga for then? He's being a little bit, he's not being mean or rude, but actually, it's a point. It's a point. If you last a moment, that's it. Then you're gone. Then you're liberated. Then that's what he's saying. So, on the Buddhist view, there would be no effort for liberation, since it would be achieved without effort every moment. Simply by being born, one would be liberated, as each self-instance is immediately annihilated. Each moment it terminates. Celibate life, religious life, undertaken for liberation according to the Buddha's own teachings, would be meaningless. They're saying even the Buddha taught, your Buddha taught to be celibate, the yamas, the niyamas. Your own Buddha, your Buddhist teachings will be meaningless. All that would be meaningless if you accept momentariness, because you'd be automatically. Why did the Buddha then spend so much time teaching all this stuff? It'd be automatically accomplished every moment. It'll be meaningless. Nor would there be the religious inquiry when using the term the Buddhist term, bhikshus, the wandering monks. Nor would there be the religious inquiry whereby bhikshus respond to questions made by the Buddha himself, right? Most of the teachings of the Buddha come from the dialogues of the Buddha, right? Just like Jesus is the testament of, his teachings. Abbiamo finito, Ella. Okay, so here we have so now we have three arguments, and then the last argument is the difference between the dead body and a live body. You can all go if you want to. I'm going to spend 1 minute on this last. And by the way, this is Tarka. Cognition is a property of the self since alternatives have been eliminated. That's what Nyaya is doing, eliminating the alternatives, one of which is momentariness. So alternatives have been eliminated and undefeated reasons have been given, and our reasons are undefeated. What are we defending? An eternal Ātman. And then there's, I've already given you the argument. The fourth argument is the difference between a dead body and a live body. It's not quite as sophisticated, but maybe it's just as potent. My friends, questions? What do you think? Let's see what you've all been chatting about. Must leave. Everyone is like, I must leave, I must leave, I must leave. Thank you, I must leave. No, kidding.
You continue.
I would like to know where can I read about the Buddhist position, because this makes sense to me. So how do the Buddhists justify this?
Well, obviously the discussion was going on for the best part of 1,000 years. I'm just not so familiar with Buddhist sources. So what I would do is, I have articles on the Anatmavad point of view. I don't have them at my fingertips. I got into it for a while. Unfortunately, I don't have a big, there's tons of stuff. I can't, Eleonora, I can't, just off the top of my head, just sort of name a book in the same way as I could for the Hindu, but just do a little research, maybe Hindu, Nyaya Buddhist polemics, or, Ātman, Anatman, and you'll find something. I think I have an email with some references in it. And
Whenever you can.
Yeah.
I look for the polemics. Okay.
Yeah, you like that, huh? Okay.
What?
You
I
like
missed that.
polemics? You like polemics. Okay. Oh, who's this? Shiva. Oh, Shiva's. I was only teasing you, Shiva. Come on.
Is he?
Don't be.
All right, Edwin.
I was just being a.
So it's interesting that the last argument you mentioned was a weak one about a dead body, because I was thinking earlier on when you were discussing about that something that experiences the senses that becomes memory, I started thinking, well, here we've been talking mostly about the senses in these examples, but what about our memories of our own birth and death, and what happens to consciousness when it is disembodied? And why is it in general one doesn't seem to have any memories of that? I was wondering what you might Nyaya might have to say about it.
I'm sorry, I spaced out. You just
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I did what you did last week, so now you got me back.
Okay, I know how it feels.
Yeah, but actually there is an argument. Can I just throw this out? And this is what I don't think is a good argument. They are saying precisely that. When a baby is just born and it clutches onto its mother, so therefore it is experiencing a little bit of panic or fear. Why would it? And fear is always a fear of a thing. So therefore they might, if it's just born, then it hasn't really experienced any things, very, very many things. So why would it be experiencing fear unless it had memories of fear from a past life? That's what I don't think. Let's just quickly look at that, Shiva, and see if it in any way overlap, and then we'll go back to your question. If we think this is a good argument for past life, for memory of past life, and then we'll look at what you just said. Okay, here's the dead body one. Consciousness is not a property of the body, because as long as the body lasts, there will be properties like color, but not consciousness. So therefore, all the other properties of the body are the same between the dead body and the live body. If you're interested in that argument, it's 3247. And it's all other properties are the same, like heat and but except this one. So this one cannot be a material property. But where's the argument about the baby? And it's supposed to be an argument for memory of a past life. I think it's weak, but Dusty thinks it's okay, and I totally respect his view. So sometimes you think something is a bit weak, and then you read it a few times, and all of a sudden you think, wait a minute, okay. So it's like sleep. You go to sleep, and you have vivid dreams. Now, most people, I know some people remember all their dreams, but for the most part, most of us don't remember any of it. And then randomly, something may trigger, oh, wait a minute, I had a dream about that. So therefore, we know that the dream samskaras are in the chitta, but when we wake, and don't you have the experience, you wake up and you're in the dream, you're still in it. The minute you realize you're awake, and then you have this couple of seconds when you realize you're awake, and you think, wait, I want to go back to my dream, and you turn around and it's gone.
Yes, it's very frustrating, Edwin.
It's very frustrating.
It's like you push pause and you want to push the play button and see what happens.
And it's gone. And that's exactly how Patanjali defines a memory. He says they're not slipping away. So, but that dream is still in the chitta. And you know that because all of a sudden something will trigger, and out of nowhere, you'll remember, wow, I had a dream about that. So therefore, all the dreams are there. So death is no different from the past life. Is basically tamas covers over all the memories. But occasionally we have a little deja vu moment or a phobia moment, phobia, which is kind of, you can't explain in the context of this life. But, Freud's deep unconscious, which he really stumbled upon something, but he didn't know what to do with it because he was trying to navigate in a one life model. He was quite brilliant in understanding there's deep level chitta. So that's tamas. But one of the siddhis in Patanjali is the yogi can go into that and pull out all the memories, like going to a library, pull out all the memories of past life. HG.
Yes, hi, namaste, Professor Bryant. Thank you for doing these sessions. I've been looking at also the Bhagavatam sessions that you've put online, and thanks for those as well. So actually, first, just an observation on, you were talking about the unifier of the sense organ experiences. And one of the arguments in the Nyaya is that one sense is limited to one sense perception. Today, there are also sort of neurological experiments where, for example, you can put sort of a machine on the back, and the back can then, with the right signals, can actually send signals to the brain to be able to see, in the sense it can see the color of something, or if it's a curve or a shape or a point or something like that. So that's happening. But of course, how I rationalize that to myself is, of course, there is that brain, that unifier that still, allows that sense perception to happen. But I thought it might be interesting for you to just...
Well, what we have to do, HG, as modern yogis, as we run into these kinds of developments in science, if let's say we subscribe to yogic truth claims, maybe not to everything, but we subscribe to basic siddhantas, we have to put on our thought caps. We have to say, okay, how would a Nyayika respond to this? And then we have to say, okay, what would yoga say about this? And then we'd have to find an explanation that would, from the point of view Nyaya, that would make sense of it without sort of challenging the Nyaya presupposition. So maybe Nyaya would say, yeah, you can do that. You can stick an electrode in the back and it creates some neuron in the brain that creates sight. But the point is, you need the argument they're saying is that can you put 5 neurons in 5 parts of the back, and then you create sight and sound? And if you could do that, who is aware of all 5? Because the neurons in the brain that are, you just apply the same logic. The neurons in the brain that are you're creating, even though there's no object of sight or smell there, that's fine. That's fair enough. But the neurons in the brain that are creating a semblance of sight, and the other ones that are creating, who's observing them at the same time? So you're still, the Nyaya argument would still hold true, it would seem to me.
Yeah, that's fair. Thanks. I just thought it will be interesting to see that there is that development happening.
Yeah, and I really, I'm not a scientist, but I really have faith that and hope that scientists will start bringing these systems together. And I really hope. And if I may say so, I obviously can't generalize and essentialize, but I have great hope for Indian scientists, because the Indian scientists have a natural kind of emotional, cultural, at least some kind of a, acceptance or some kind of a relationship with these traditions. And I'm really, and at the same time, are state of the art in terms of Western sciences. And I'm hoping in the future that there will be a lot of really interesting discussions and bridges and conversations, especially, of course, you don't have to be Indian or American or anything else. It's just a body, but it just happens to be the case that, that Indians have this natural kind of a, relationship with the traditions. And I'm hoping that a lot of sort of groundbreaking conversations are going to emerge there. So that's my hope. That's my hope for the future. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, I do have another question. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sort of my logic brain always wants to have a why or a what or a where to everything that I encounter in the texts. So for example, when, there was one lecture where you said that, why does Krishna wear jewelry, or why does he, wear those embellishments? And, because he can, because he wants to. But I think for me, what rational explanation potentially made sense was to say that actually it's for us with limited minds to be able to see Krishna better, to be able to sort of, when you're doing japa, it's easier for you to visualize this person who's wearing yellow, who's having jewels. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but so that at least helps me a little bit. But then I think there's a
Well,
point where,
hang on. Can we just
Yeah.
stop there for a moment? As you just said a lot there.
Sure.
Vaishnavism would have would resist that, because the Vaishnavas would say it is not that something assumes this color and form so that our limited human minds can comprehend it and meditate and visualize it. That would be more of an Advaitin way of thinking. Vaishnavism would say, no, Bhagavan is blue because he wants to be blue. And he is all of those things, not that it's some kind of a compromise or some kind of a limitation in order for Bhagavan to be comprehensible. So just be aware that there will be a difference in what you just said that would be maybe more acceptable to Advaita Vedanta, but Vaishnavism would resist that. Logic can establish there is an Ishvara, but can tell you nothing about the nature of the Ishvara. This is right in the beginning of Vedanta Sutra. Only Ishvara can reveal himself. Ishvari can reveal herself. And so, and when they do that, they reveal themselves, what you first said, because they want to be. And Krishna is blue because he wants to be blue. And if you're Bhagavan, you get to do what you want to do. So it's simplistic, but then when you're in the realm of theology, philosophy can only take you as far as establishing that there must be an Ishvara, which is the topic of next class.
I think that my question is, how do you deal, so there is that overwhelm that comes because my logic then has to stop at one point.
Yeah.
So how do I deal with that overwhelm of the unknown and then just, sort of have that belief that yes, because it cannot be described by material energy.
That's up to you. You push logic as far as it goes, and that's why you do Nyaya.
That is also my question.
These Nyaya.
That's also my question.
Okay.
At which point do we bring in the experience?
Yeah.
Our subjective experience into all of this.
Nyayakas in their intellectual life, you pushed reason as far as it could go. In their private life, a lot of them were Shaivas. So they understood. Through reason, all we can do is establish that there must be an intelligent being behind the universe, and we'll look at the arguments next week. And that consciousness must be distinct from the... That's it. Then you have to decide. You either stop there and get off the bus, say, like, I remain trapped by my buddhi. I am willing to remain confined by the limitations which the samskaras of my buddhi, and I pushed it as far as I can, and that's it for this life. And then you're a philosopher. Or you want to go further than that. And you want to say, okay, if there is an Ishvara, I need to know that Ishvara, but I can't know that Ishvara with my rational brain. And therefore, right at the beginning of Vedanta, the Vedantins say, if you want to go further than that, then Ishvara reveals himself and herself. At that point, you have to take a leap of faith. It's up to you if you want to do it or not. So Ishvara reveals himself as Shiva and Krishna and Vishnu and Ishvari as Devi. And you make it, and at that point, you go beyond reason and you absorb your mind in these different claims. And at that point, if you're really sincere, now you're in the realm of bhakti, you're in a different universe. You've left the universe of reason. You haven't thrown it away. You've just used it as far as it can go. You've pushed it until it's run out of gas. There's nothing else it can give you. Then you say, but if you say, but I want to go further. So reason has said, well, I served you as best with the best I could. So then you have to rely on Ishvara. You say, Ishvara, look, I'm surrendering, and look what I'm doing. I I'm hanging on reason with one hand, well, on my other hand, I'm reaching up to you. You better grab me, because I don't know where I am right now. I'm in no man's land. And then Ishvara will come to you, and that's bhakti. Then you get to a point where you don't care about reason. You become mad. You go mad. You roll around. Your tears flow out of your eyes. Someone talks Nyaya Sutra. You tell them you don't even talk to them. You say, no, just tell me about Krishna. Where's Radha? What happened to Radha and Krishna? Oh, don't talk to me about reason. But that's way down the road. Okay, let's take another question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I was just curious, this might not be within the realm of this class or not, I don't know, but it struck me as curious that the Nyayakas got away with like stopping at the 6 lingas and calling that an eternal self, because they're using this rational argument, which makes sense, to say that if the different sense perceptions are all separate, there must be one overarching being which is perceiving those different sense percepts, putting them together. Right? So how did they then come to the conclusion, or maybe this isn't their conclusion, but it seems like they stopped at a definition of the self being that which has desire, aversion, happiness, suffering, effort, and knowledge. But there must be an overarching thing that knows all of those also, which is more like what the Advaitins say.
Well, it's more like what Sankhya would say.
Oh, okay.
And Advaita's Vedanta. Vedanta would also say, So Sankhya would say,
yeah, the awareness would be supreme. The overall
only awareness would be supreme, and the other 5 things. Although free will is a bit tricky, because Vedanta would say free will as well is in the Atman, but certainly Sukha, Dukkha, Raga, Dvesha, they would argue must be in the mind. That's a different kind of conversation. Conversation between Sankhya and Nyaya we'd have to keep for another day. But you're very right.
That'd be further down the road. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or it would be another. We're not. But we may get to it in this course. But yeah, but your point holds good. But the main thing is they would agree that consciousness requires a distinct substratum, so that would unite them against, say, Buddhists. But then internal to the Vedic tradition, then there'd have to be a secondary conversation. Well, hang on a minute. Fine, we agree that the Atman, but now we need to have a little, let's close the door there. Let's, we dealt with the outside danger. Well, we need to have a little in-house conversation here. Why do you guys say that Raga, Dvesha, Sukha, Dukkha is in the Atman? And that's but the Nyaya is pretty good. It'll have I'd have to revisit those. They're not fresh in my mind. Otherwise, I'd spit out really try to summarize them for you. I can't right this second remember why Nyaya gets a bit weird in places. Why they would say their properties of the qualities of the Atman. I mean, personally, I favor the Sankhya view. Although I would be very, very strongly agree with Nyaya that free will, in addition to consciousness, has to be in the Atman. So I'm sorry I can't give you a more precise account of the discussion.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, thank you. I did have one other comment. I guess it's a comment. I've heard, this is obviously hearsay because I can't give you references off the top of my head, but I've heard in Buddhism, not only they have this term of not self, anatma, but also it implies that there's no other. And therefore it implies the oneness and the unity of all, meaning that there would be a reason then to treat others with the same dignity, respect that you would also like to be treated with, that sort of thing. But I don't know if that's probably a different sect of Buddhists that I don't know what specific Buddhists they're arguing against here. But I just heard that, but I don't know.
Yeah, and remember that there's going to be a difference between classical Buddha, the various Buddhist schools, and there's lots of different schools, and kind of high street, some Buddhists, like a lot of yoga, which is kind of blended in all bits and pieces. It's the oneness. It's not a oneness of Advaita Vedanta.
Oh,
not
okay.
the oneness of it, that the self is one in an Advaita Vedanta point of view. No, but all Buddhist traditions are pluralistic. There's a plurality of streams of momentary, what we might call a person. It's really a stream of the.
But they call that not self, though. At the same time, they say that's not self. That
But they would
stream
say
is not the self.
it's not self because nothing lasts for more than a moment. To say something is a self is to posit it endures. And what they mean by that is there's no enduring self. We'd be clear about because it was misunderstood in early days that they were called nihilists and voidists. They're not saying there's nothing. They're not saying there's nothing. They're saying there's no enduring self. Nothing endures.
Yeah.
It's just another way of talking about momentariness. But there is a distinct flow of momentary, interdependent, interconnected moments that is what conventionally is known as me. And there's a different series or flow of interdependent momentary that is you, and in that sense my flow is ultimately metaphysically the same as your flow. So in that sense, not that we are one in an Advaita Vedanta sense that all Atmans merge into Brahman and they literally and ontologically are one. No, we are the same kinds of things in terms of our flowness and momentariness and interdependence, and recognizing that generates compassion. But all yoga schools would say that. Everybody, whether it's Atman or not Atman, that doesn't change that. I am the same as you, whether my Atman is a yoga Atman and your Atman is a yoga Atman, whether my Atman is a Nyaya Atman with Raga Dvesha and all kinds of stuff going on, or whether yours is, whether my Atman is the Advaita Vedanta Atman, yours is the same, or whether my Anatman is the flow. We're all every single
essentially
has to recognize the sameness of all being. So it may be stressed more in one tradition, but everybody totally and utterly embraces that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Right, my friends. So we went from we're down to 30, the last survivors. You survived, yeah. Well done, well done, well done. Okay, my friends. And Jai Shri Ram, we're in Vrindavan, everybody. Let's come on, the bells, everybody is a sacred place. We want the whole of Vrindavan. Radha is the queen. Remember, Radha, Ishwari. Jai Shri Radhe Shyam. Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me just have a quick look at the chats. Give me 1 second. You can all log off. I'm just going to check out the chats in case there's anything.
Yeah, very.